All right, we are live from the big blue marble we call Earth or Terra, the third rock from the sun, live, Centerline Systems, Cialis After Dark. Here we go. Tonight's episode, we're going to ask the question and have a conversation. You see our guests here, and if you've watched any of my podcasts or even the Mission Critical, you know these guys, but we'll introduce them in a second. I just want to do a little intro, little fluff, as the one gentleman calls it, little housekeeping. And then we're going to kind of rotate into the question and just kick it off. It's Friday night, beginning of 2025, new year, hopefully it's not out with the old boss, same as the new, or in with the new boss, same as the old boss. So, hey, just a couple quick things. Thanks to everybody who was on the live stream last night for just the Centerline Systems, just our kind of Thursday night live stream. I had a ton of fun. I hope you did too. And here, I guess I'll just jump ahead. Some of the guys in the chat made a drinking game of, and it's been decided when I touch my beard, that doesn't count. I either have to like brush, or comb my beard. And you do you guys are all adults, but the game that the guys came up with last night is whenever I do that, you have to take a drink. I don't make the rules. I just run the podcast. So,
hey, Mark, just to be clear. So it's an official grooming act that you have to make.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Okay. Yeah, I can't just touch it or look, oh, that's a good point. And do my best. No, it's got to be. Yeah, I've got to grab it. Yeah, I got to grab a grooming tool and do something like that. Then
it's like the NFL. Did he make an official? Did he make a football move? So if you made a grooming move,
yes,
then the drink should go down.
Then that's drink time. All right. Okay. So that was one part of our fluff, our housekeeping. But great job to Blackbeard over on the CLS Gear Chat. Some guys were already talking about this. And Blackbeard came up with the Booze and Beard Battalion. I don't know, but that's got a nice ring to it right there. Ooh, the Booze and Beard Battalion. Maybe that's going to be a hoodie or something like that. I don't know. We already did that. Oh, and then the real piece of housekeeping. Well, two things, as I mentioned last night, and I'm going to do a standalone video tomorrow. I'm going to call it the 2024 Bundaroo. So, go back and watch last night's episode. Some of our gear that we had for the ships the next business day that's still left over from Christmas. We're going to bundle all that stuff together. I'll do a video, like I said, on that tomorrow. And then last but not least, so our good friends Blake over at Millstone Self-Reliance Group. We kind of had to put things on hiatus at the end of last year, kind of late fall. We can say it. Him and his wife had a kid. So obviously all kinds of things got crazy. We're going to start bringing that back up. But what we're going to do is the first Monday of every month for probably the first quarter. So January, February, March of this year, the first Monday of every month, we're just going to do on Centerline. We're just going to do Millstone Mondays, right? And so Blake and I have already talked, and we've got our game plan for Monday. But we're going to use this time, that's first quarter, to really continue moving forward with that and setting it up behind the scenes, for the training and all that kind of stuff. But so Monday of next week, it's the 6th of January, same time, 1800 Central, here live, Centerline Systems, but it'll be for Millstone. Most of you guys who are watching over on Millstone are watching here anyway. So that's what our thing was like. Well, I just keep jumping back and forth until we're ready to do it. So that, boys, is my housekeeping, AKA fluff, as the one gentleman said. Hey, and I kind of made a call here. I'm going to make a little bit of a command decision and kind of make these Cialis After Darks a little bit more like the Thursdays. I'm not going to read every comment, but we got to give people a shout out. If you're here and if you're in the chat, you got to get a shout. So here, just real quickly, Gene is saying, see, again, the drinking game, drink time games may commence. AVV is though saying, hey, I'd like to do it, but I'm going to go to the gym, and booze and alcohol and cardio don't go together. Yeah, Roger. Gene is saying, now you have to drink. Yeah, you're right, because I just did it. And then now that's two. And Snowshoe is saying, like, he's got his beverage. Let's rock. All right. I will very seriously I will try not to comb my beard every 3 seconds, tonight's episode. All right. On that, why don't we just, again, everybody knows these gentlemen, but let's just, in all, fairness, just in case there is somebody who's watching who doesn't know you guys, let's just do a brief introduction. Let's start off with you, Redbeard, and then we'll come down to P. Rick.
Yeah. So I've known Mark for a long time. I did a podcast with him, Mission Critical, and I am the resident constitutionalist, gun guy. I love history, not just American history, but I also like Eastern European history and kind of the greater aspect of that realm. So I'm just here to kind of fill in where I can and offer a little nuance where it makes sense. So
Jeremy is trying to be so, P-Rick, can you tell he's trying to be so reserved right now? He's trying to just keep that energy pushed down because, he's, there you go. Yeah. All right, P. Rick, tell everybody about yourself, sir.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. I've been on this podcast a few times, and then also Mission Critical. Geez, I'm an older guy, so I've done a lot of stuff. Started off as a Marine long ago, ended up working in law enforcement, spent some time on a special forces training team, later on with a recon team, and that's where I met Mark initially on the infantry side, then ended up at the agency where we kind of reconnected, didn't work together, but reconnected whenever we were back stateside.
Reconnected, and it feels so good. I don't know if that's how the song went, but I just made it.
I don't know if we ever had to share body heat back in on that side or not, just to get through. But we're prepared to. We understand that, right? So, yeah, that. I also worked in law enforcement. Narcotics, SWAT, regular patrols when I started off, and then now I'm with the glorious DHS, and we're looking good for 2025 finally.
However, just as always, P. Rick's comments do not represent any
governmental organization. These are mine and mine alone.
That's right. All right. So don't anybody freaking out. Hey, and on that note, I'm going to kind of throw something in here. I'm going to try here for the next couple live streams. Just my kind of like little appeal. Right? You guys all know my background. And I'm not joking. It really is hard. It took me years to overcome. So as a clandestine officer, and I really did my job. The idea of being on the internet, you would have done things differently now because everybody's on the internet, but, working to, maintain your cover and all that kind of credentials and stuff. So it was really tough for me to kind of really overcome my hesitation of being on the internet and being in front of a camera. I work in a crowd, talking to somebody face to face, can do that all day long in spades. So help me. I'm not joking. I think I'm getting a little better, but that's why I'm really kind of liking the chat. So please, if you're watching this, you don't have to do this. And I know this is kind of what some other podcasts do, but even just chime in and chat where you're from, so then we get a sense of who's watching. But I'm not joking. That kind of helps me kind of focus, and I get to see something else, and it helps kind of, keep my not inhibitions, but look, just even to this day, I'm like, man, you should not be on the internet. And I kind of screwed up. I started doing this and I did it in true name. I should have been doing this in an alias right from the very beginning. But so anyway, hey, for this episode tonight and any other thing that we do, if it's live, you don't have to chime in and comment in the chat all the time, but just leave a chat and tell us where you're from. I know that's kind of, but it might help me actually just. So here, I'm going to throw Redbeard under the bus real quickly. I don't want to get into it too much, but, about a month ago, Redbeard kind of disappeared for a little bit, 2 months ago. And then we kind of reconnected, and I'm just like, yo, what's up, man? Where you been? And he's giving his story. And I'm just like, dude, it ain't about you, motherfucker. I mean, the rest of us, maybe I needed to talk to you, so come on, help out, be there. That was funnier when I said it to him, I think. I don't know. Redbeard didn't chuckle about that.
Yeah, well, pneumonia sucks. So,
well, okay, yeah, whatever. All right, on that note, all right, so you guys know everybody now. We're gonna get into it, and I'm gonna kind of preface and start the conversation. Here we go. There we go. So here, somebody doing it the right way. Northern Minnesota.
Oh yeah,
Ground Fog. He's from the state of Clap. Hey, Ground Fog, how you doing tonight, sir? Hey, but seriously, so the question is NATO, and not to try to push our old channel, but Redbeard and I did this oh gosh, Redbeard, how many years ago was that? Was that like 2 years ago, whenever we were doing Mission Critical?
Year and a half ago.
Yeah,
something like that.
2022-ish, 2022 into 23. I think we
Yeah,
stopped.
yeah, right at the precipice. It was shortly into when everything in Ukraine kicked off.
Yeah, okay.
It wasn't much after that, like midway into 2022, I think.
So we did 2 episodes over there about NATO. I think P. Rick may have actually been one of our guests on one of the episodes too. So, if NATO is something that's interesting to you, go over to Mission Critical podcast, find those episodes, or, tonight. We kind of in our pregame decided, there's so many current events going on right now. We're going to kind of stay away from them a little bit because it might just kind of not necessarily confuse, but again, there's so much stuff that the gist of this conversation or the point of the argument, it could just get lost in all the avalanche of so many other things going on. Yeah. And that's really kind of one of the points I wanted to make is, boys and girls, just look around you. I'm kind of being a little serious here. Just look around you in your life over the last, 2, 4, 6, 10 years. Man, things move so fast and there's so much information out there. Now, again, a lot of that just simply is because of technology and the internet, and now information sharing is so much faster. But if you just look at the last week, of what's been going on, first it's this, and then it's that, and then it's this, and then it's this, and then it's another thing. You as an individual have a really hard time just staying focused and dedicating your time and your energy to one issue. I know that's why Redbeard wanted to really get involved here tonight because, not speaking for him, he'll say this, but I know this is true. He kind of stays, hey, I don't have the time to take that quarterback view and look at everything. So I'm going to stay kind of more narrowly focused. Whereas I think P. Rick and then me, P. Rick because of his day-to-day, and me just because of my background and what used to be my day-to-day, I just have no choice but read 4, 6, 8 different news things a day and digest that or ingest that media, because that's like intelligence. So we're going to kind of avoid some of the other things that are going on, even though they may have some tangential overlap with NATO. But let's just kind of jump right into it. I mean, the question, I'll just pause the question. We'll just kind of get opinions, and we'll go into the argument behind why are we in NATO? What is NATO? What does it stand for? What is its task and purpose? And why are we involved in it? And given the current world, the world that we live in, you hear everybody always wants to talk about, oh, that's old and outdated. Our First Amendment's old and outdated. The Second Amendment's old and outdated, written at a different time. Well, if that's how you're going to argue, can't I make that same case for NATO? I mean, there is no more Soviet Union. The wall is down. We had a golden opportunity to bridge that gap, so to speak. And, and especially if you look at Reagan and Gorbachev, the inroads that those guys made for, I guess, bridge building. Yeah. So, and then if you go all the way into Ukraine, part of the whole reason Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons, part of the reasons they gave up those nuclear weapons, gave them back over to Russia, former Soviet Union, was the assurance that NATO would not move farther eastward towards Russia. And if you know your history, Russia's kind of got a problem with people on their doorsteps and invading them, right? So they might just have a little bit of a psychological twitch when it comes to that shit. So the question is, why NATO? And I'm going to end my comment and bring it to these guys. And because if you look at what NATO was back in the 50s, 60s, or 60s, 70s, 80s, during that time period, it was a defense kind of apparatus, for the countries of Europe to, quote unquote, come together and for their common defense. NATO now seems to be almost a pseudo nation state. It's almost like they've got their own political arm and public affairs. They have bases and people posted in Asia, which has nothing to do with the North Atlantic. That would be the South Pacific. I don't know, kind of, anyway. So you see my point. For me, I'm going to be a hard pass. It's going to take a lot for somebody to convince me that we should still stay in NATO, especially given all of those events that we're not going to kind of cover tonight that are happening domestically or that affect us domestically. Hey, yeah, ethnocentric, xenophobic, whatever you want to call it. I'm an American. I'm obviously talking about America here. If you're English or French or Dutch, you might have a different perspective of NATO. I'm giving the American opinion on it. And we've got enough shit going on in our country right now where I'm not really 100% sold that we need to be, I mean, because we are NATO right there. I'm just going to shut it up right there. So why are we doing it? What is the net positive for the United States of America to still continue being a member of NATO going forward 2025? Who wants to take it?
I'll take it first.
All right.
Because I think I might be able to give something for Patrick to build off of, which I kind of get the impression I very well may. So, first off, what is NATO? It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I believe it was organized in 1949. I don't know if you guys need to correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was 49 that it was put together. And it's been around ever since then. And, kind of like Mark had said, the whole point of it was basically to create the defensive organization and a bulwark against, the Soviet Union, and to basically help bolster the collective nations that are a part of it. And typically there's, nothing on the face wrong with that. It's a good way for people to collaborate, exchange ideas, train with each other, get to know each other, and have a common defense. Now, the issue is at some point along the line, and I would even posit before the Soviet Union fell, that there started to be this tilt towards, X amount of money in. You started having a very slow collectivization of power and say, more influence over the involved nations. And then once the 90s came around and you had the fall of the Soviet Union, they really started to, and when I say they, predominantly Germany, Britain, and the US, they really started to kind of come up with these schemes and ideas of okay, we're going to tell the Russians this because this is what they feel the deal is that they're going to get. But we don't actually have to follow through with that. And the common thing is nowadays you'll hear people say, oh, well, it was an informal agreement. Well, I told Mark this a couple days ago. Over the course of the past 100 years, we've made so many informal agreements that most countries took as a legitimate agreement. And so, if we look at it that way, this should have been no different. But when you had these individuals, and there were several individuals in a very short amount of time in the 90s when they're making these agreements with Yeltsin and I would even argue, Gorbachev before saying, hey, look, we're not going to go farther. We're not going to extend farther. We're going to hold it. We're not going to go into East Germany. Everything's going to be fine, and we'll find a way to cooperate. It started to fall apart when you started to have the State Department and, even further into just the general executive of the presidency, to where their idea of proper diplomacy was like, okay, well, we'll word it to them one way, and then we're actually going to come back and say, well, you didn't hear us correctly. We said this, but we actually meant this. And as much as I want to say that the United States and Britain and Germany don't represent a large portion of NATO, at that point in the 90s, they really did. They were the most prominent voices. And now you have the United States, which does most of the funding. We make most of the arrangements or the agreements. We have most of the pull. We have most of the clout. And it's becoming a point to where it's no longer defensive. It's dishonest. It can't be trusted. We put way more into it than we need to. And unfortunately, it's starting to involve itself so much politically in the affairs of other countries that the countries that are a part of NATO no longer have their sovereignty, because if they do something that NATO doesn't like, which is like, hey, we'd rather not get involved in sanctioning Russia, or we'd rather not get involved with sending weapons to Ukraine, they get in trouble. And they're told, if you don't do this, then we're going to punish you, however that punishment looks. It's become a mess, a very authoritarian mess, which usurps the sovereignty of most countries. And I would argue puts us at risk by dragging us into conflicts we don't need to be in. And I'm sure that there's a lot more that Patrick can offer into it, but that was a very, very rough summary of a very long history that I just basically glossed over. There's a lot more to it. I would highly suggest that anybody after this discussion go do some research. There's a new book out by Scott Horton, who does a fantastic job, at least from what I've read so far, of dates and times and references and very notable moments, explaining much more in depth than that brief summary that I provided. So.
P. Rick, the only thing I want to add to that is obviously Ukraine is going to come up a lot in this conversation.
Yeah.
And because, there seems to be some weird leverage going on. So just, everybody, if you don't already know, that's what's going to happen here. I mean, obviously you can't talk about the current state of NATO and whether we should or should not, continue our alliance or our membership in that organization. Ukraine's going to have to come into that conversation, just period. Mm-hmm. So, P. Rick.
All right. So, I think a lot of people, especially, as Americans, we should have a little bit of a, healthy distrust of the government. I mean, that's kind of like in our nature and how the country was formed, right? So now you're talking about an organization made up of several governments. And I'd say the United States is easily the biggest financial contributor to that organization. That provides interesting opportunities for our country to accomplish certain goals without, 100% U.S., flag on it, right? So that's something that you always have to look at with a critical eye. The next piece, too, is when you get people in influential positions from countries that don't put in like maybe not even a quarter or a fraction of what the United States puts in, but through, force of personality and will, they're able to sway and influence others to vote or take action on certain things that may be beyond the scope of what the organization was initially designed for. That's a problem. And that's I think that's just an inherent thing with any government or any organization that's created as of, because of a crisis. And I say that as working for Homeland Security, right? So it's something you always have to look out for because right, after 9/11, hey, the Patriot Act, oh my God, okay, we've got to catch everybody. But now, are there limitations on that? How do they bring that back? How is that, actually executed? That's something we have to watch for. When you're talking about an organization that's set up to provide protection for, several countries in Europe, when they start flexing out to, like Mark said, you're in Asia and you're all these different places. What are you doing? I mean, I don't to say that there's a use called mission creep. This is way, way, way beyond that because now we're and several government organizations, quasi-government organization, bullying and influencing others around the world. They should watch and probably stand up against because it's a waste of money. And back to Mark's comment.
Hey, just to give you a quick heads up that you were breaking up there a little bit, P. Rick. We kind of got you back now.
Okay. Yeah. I got a little freeze action on your.
Yeah. It kind of.
But anyway, it's just something I think that everybody needs to be on and stand up. And I'd be happy to read this book because it's the first I've heard of it. But I've read that on the military side a couple times. Especially on the Ukraine side, I was deployed as an intel officer to support some of the things going on, just to handle Ukraine crisis, which is what it was being called. We're driving the show, us, our major counterparts, the Brits. We're running the show. Everybody knows it. It's just a question of, hey, why do we need this anymore? And if it's just to draw lines and say, okay, well, hey, if Ukraine was part of NATO, Russia wouldn't have gone in there. Is that the sole reason? But what are these other countries putting into it? Why aren't their militaries professional? There's no standardization. There's no agreement. It's just a train wreck. So, and Mark, I don't know if you had any experience with foreign militaries, overseas. I did on a couple occasions. Hey, the Brits, I'll work with those guys any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Some of the others, not so much. You have this idea that, hey, well, they're a NATO country. They should be on the same standards we are. Not.
No, it doesn't work that way in reality. And the real world does not work that way at all. And then back to your point, you both have kind of alluded to it. I mean, like, who's really running NATO? Well, it's the United States, the UK, Germany. Germany's definitely become that continental kind of powerhouse now, and they're flexing their muscle and their influence. But at the end of the day, and I kind of want to bring it back to both you guys, like it's like who's in charge of the White House, right? Who's in charge of NATO? Like who's making the policy decisions? And why is NATO's policy decision, or why are NATO spokespeople out there, like talking about preparation for war with Russia, and hey, NATO countries, start looking at your I don't think this is a bad thing. So I just realized what I'm about to say is going to sound kind of negative. At the end of the day, you want your allies to be ready. And you want them to be prepared, as P. Rick just said. You kind of would like to have everybody on the same standard, the same sheet of music, so to speak. So seeing some of these countries, talk about defense recently should be a good thing. But if you look at the tone and tenor or the environment, the theme, for in which those conversations are taking place, it's a very aggressive. We're preparing to go to war with Russia, even though no NATO member is at threat from Russia. It makes absolutely no sense. So again, that's where I keep coming back. It was is there a country called NATO now? I know where their headquarters is, but is that like, their national capital as well? Like, are they like the Vatican? Like their compound is a sovereign nation state. What the fuck is going on here?
I'll add something here to this. It's becoming really quite interesting to see how this whole structure is, because you do have that situation to where it seems like NATO has this it has this group of people, the leadership representatives of all these different countries that are involved, and it's wild because they seem to be making all these decisions, but at the same time it's still like this one monolithic entity that's making the decision. It's not even like the will of the people in these countries, right? Which if you really want to look at it under the microscope, there's a lot of people within these countries that are NATO members that really are disagreeable. They don't even want to be a part of NATO anymore because they feel like they're going to get dragged into the next major conflict that happens, and they're already hurting. They don't have enough money. They don't have basic necessities, and they're like, why are we doing this? And furthermore, it's also quite interesting, and I would say that this what I'm about to say kind of more disproportionately affects Europe as a whole when it pertains to NATO. But the European NATO members, some of them just don't care. They just have their own agenda, and I hate to say it, but the Polish is one of those countries. They're just like, well, like, we're Poland. We're going to do what we want to do because our people are more important in the end of the day than NATO is. And yeah, we'll do basically what we need to do to meet the criteria, but we're not going to do what you tell us to do. Like, dude, we're Poland, right? And it's
okay.
And
before you go too far in that, because that's a great point, and I want to come back to Poland. So again, it's an alliance, but their member states are still sovereign countries, and then like to what Redbeard's getting at, NATO's turned into like the Sopranos. Do what we say, or we're going to bully you this, bully you that. And I just want to talk about Romania, just where I don't want people to forget about that. Like to P. Rick's point. And then the other side of that coin, maybe coming back to P. Rick Redbeard's point, but coming back to P. Rick, and then AVV just made a similar comment in the chat. I'll bring that up in a second. What the hell about? Okay, so what about when one of your member states is acting the way Turkey is in regards to supporting a terrorist organization? It is a terrorist organization that has overthrown Assad in Syria. So, okay, now we've got this. So what, like, why are we involved in this shit? Like, this is madness, P. Rick. You're muted.
Okay, I'm that guy now.
That's usually me. Hey, Mark, you're muted. That happens usually for me.
Right?
That should be the drinking game. How many times we say, Mark, you're muted in the course of an episode. So,
right.
But anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, as far as NATO or anything like that goes, every country obviously has its own interest, their own concerns, their own agendas, as they should, right? But you're right. Like that brings up a great point with Turkey. Why are there any repercussions for supporting a terror organization? How does that work? And also from a leadership standpoint, when you are let's say like senior representatives of your country that are in NATO, and this comes back to, and this is every country. I'm talk about us, but everybody's like this. If you have weak leadership and you're just told, hey, go in there and do the best, bring everybody together, and you've got somebody that's weak in there, well, you're still responsible for your own nation's interests in that organization instead of acquiescing to what everyone else wants. And I've heard time and time again through senior military channels and things like that, like, oh, we need to make sure that we maintain the partnership. We need to maintain the partnership. Yeah. Well, why do we need to maintain the partnership with, let's say, I'll just pick on them, but like Romania or whoever, right? What are we getting out of that versus what are we providing? It's just basic business. What's our return on investment for that relationship? Because at the end of the day, NATO is set up to defend those countries in case of the old school Soviet Union invasion, or maybe now the Russian the potential for a Russian invasion. Yeah. We're sitting over here. We've got the distance, so we're the provider of arms, equipment, funding, and everything else. Why are we acquiescing to these other countries? And that's not to stand up here on some soapbox, but that's our interest. We've got to be mindful of ours. They've got their own, and we do too. So that's the thing that troubles me is when I see people for the sake of being partners or being thought of as cool, like not doing our country a service, one that somebody took an oath to uphold.
Or the relationship you're in is completely one-sided and you're getting played. Your girlfriend's cheating on you every Friday night because you're over here on, Cialis After Dark, holding your NATO meeting. And then, but then if you call somebody out, or if you talk about it, you're the bad guy. You were supposed to just all ignore it. And that may have seemed like a strange example, but just think of how Trump was. I mean, just look at how the media, like it's just so amazing, how corporate mainstream media dinosaur media and the left, right? The liberals, the people who I used to look up to as a kid, like those classic liberals. Enough of the war, right? We don't need to be antagonizing. We don't need to move forward. As AVV even asked or commented, is that even constitutional for us to be involved in such an entangling alliance? That's a great question. Maybe it just like so many other things that happen in America nowadays, no one actually even asked that question. And if you go all the way back to Obamacare, I mean, just to, kind of point out another just a gross miscarriage of justice. Taxes have to start in Congress. So when they were writing the CARE Act or whatever they called that thing, I can't remember what it was, Obamacare, they had to phrase it so it wouldn't come across as a punishment or a tax, because then it would have had to have started other places. And no one, like seriously, no politician said, hey, you're just doing a little bullshit end around. You're trying to game the system. No, if this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be a tax that has to go through Congress. That's how our system works. Same thing to what I think we're talking about here in NATO, right? It's just, hey, we're getting screwed over every other Saturday, every other Friday. Yeah. Why are we still doing this? And who's in charge? Who are the people who are like making these decisions or allowing this to happen? And then, a couple of years ago, here comes Trump saying, yeah, we're not going to do this. You're going to start paying your fair share. You guys are ripping us off. And then everybody suddenly got up in arms about that. They didn't get up in arms because we were getting ripped off. They were up in arms that the money, the gravy train, was going to maybe start ending for other people, because at this point in time, I mean, I guess that's kind of my weird way. Why else is NATO around there if not to generate revenue for a certain group of people? I mean, I know that's my own speculation, but
no, hey, Mark, that's right. If you think about it, we're by the United States being the major contributor financially, what does that allow, Germany, France, Belgium, Netherlands, what does that allow them to do? That allows them to like not spend money on their national defense budget and spend it on other things. So those people kind of get used to that. And now all of a sudden you're holding them accountable, saying, hey, the gift horse is closing its mouth, buddy. You're on your own now. You need to pony up. Whoa,
right.
Who's the asshole who said that? Well, the one that's been throwing you the gift the whole time. That's who, right? So I hope that with the new coming administration, this whole relationship and the dynamics of it get revisited, and possibly with the potential for removing us from this, right? There needs to be a new dynamic, and if they're going to want to keep it just because of like now we're talking nostalgia, it's been around for like going 70 some years, then it needs to drastically change, and it needs to have the United States driving the whole thing, because let's be honest, we are doing that.
Well, and at that point in time, just bringing it over to you, Redbeard, and I don't know where you're going to go, but if you want to address what P. Rick said, if it's going to continue, then to P. Rick's point, then we're in charge, and then we're making the calls. And you can either stay on Team NATO, or you can get the fuck out, go to sit at the kiddie table. Our number's in the phone book when you grow up.
Form an EU version of it.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I'm happy you said that, because that was the lie that they pitched to Poland and several other countries in the 90s, saying, hey, we're stepping away from the military aspect and we're just going to have a political organization, which is the same lie they sold to the Russians. That's why the Russians agreed to so many of their proposals, because they're like, oh, okay, like that's fine. And I just want to add too that the crazy thing is we're throwing around the sovereignty notion of countries in NATO. Have you ever noticed, and this is why I brought up Poland, because it only applies to a handful of NATO countries, not all of them. The only ones that even retain some form of their sovereignty, which is not many, are the ones who are a part of it, but also have the gumption to give the middle finger to the commission that oversees NATO, or the General Assembly that oversees NATO, because they're like, no, I actually don't even care about this, and there's nothing I know for a fact that you can do about it. What are you going to do? Sanction me? Okay, that's no different than what you already do. And the unfortunate thing is, for the smaller countries that are in NATO that literally were sold this grandiose idea, because let's not BS about this. It's countries like Estonia and so many others, these small little nations, that they're like, hey, you're tiny. We know you're tiny. And those big bad Russians at some point are, that's the line they sold them. They're going to come to your door one day and they're going to look for the land. So if you join us, you're going to be the one swinging the big dick in the room now. Okay. Because you have the United States and Britain and all of us. And look at what they do to these countries. As soon as they want to try and look out for their own people, they're like, you owe us. You have to put into the defense budget. You have to support us. You have to do X amount of, collaborative missions every year. You have to do peacekeeping. You have like all of these different things. And it usurps the sovereignty of these countries. And it's wholly inappropriate in terms of even normal diplomatic relations. I would argue you would not have seen this type of behavior potentially during the beginning of NATO. That's not to say it didn't happen, but it would have been so rare, because another country would have been like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you're saying you want to protect these people, but you're just sitting there bullying them, and you're using them for whatever resources they can get. And on a final note, and then I'll yield the floor. Have you ever noticed that around the time of the inception of NATO, European countries had a lot of their own manufacturing. They had a lot of their own military supply domestically. I mean, they did some trading here and there, but they were manufacturing a lot of their own military equipment, doing a lot of that. And some of these countries didn't actually have terrible military training. They were actually fairly adept. As soon as NATO started getting more of its hands in these countries, we're the ones selling them. If it's not us, it's the other four major countries, whether it's Britain or Germany or whoever. We're supplying them, we're training them, and we're lauding it as like it's the most superior training in the world. Cough, cough, look at Ukraine and see how that's working out. It's like we're literally destroying their own national ability to supply themselves because of either dependency or telling them we're going to sell you this instead. it's usury from the very moment it starts with this false idea of protection, and it's
there it is.
Sucks.
It's not necessarily usury, but it is definitely a racket. It's a protection scheme.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And back to P. Rick, or maybe it was one of you guys kind of doing a little thing like, you know, like the older NATO country welcoming a new NATO country and talking about the benefits. You know, behind closed doors, there was a little wink, wink, nod, nod. By the way, dude, you know, you're going to be able to pad your portfolio here. You're going to retire and get like, come on as a consultant. You know, there's all kinds of ways in which, you know, wink, wink. If you guys know what you're doing, you know, play the number shuffle game, and you know, there's a lot of free money and extra money in there. So again, it's an extortion racket, and you know, to your point, because the moment you don't go along with it, you know, again, you know, Romania, Georgia, again, some of these smaller countries come to my mind.
Slovakia, even.
Yeah, exactly. You know, well, we can even look, you know, and this isn't necessarily just a NATO issue, but this goes to, I guess it is, because it speaks to a larger trend. You know, Orban from Hungary. Yeah. You know, anybody who's outspoken against the EU, you know, or against NATO is ostracized, slammed, criticized. For what? Being more concerned about their country and their interests.
Yeah. Well, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with the two new additions of Finland and Sweden, right? What's that relationship going to be like? More importantly, where are their members going to sit, you know, within the board of NATO, and what roles are they going to play in that? You know, that's going to be interesting to see. You know, if I'm in Sweden or Finland right now, to your guys' point, I'd say, hey, you know what? I will. You know, this is a great addition. Number one, everybody's going to come to our aid if the big bad Russians invade. But also, guess what? We could save a shit ton of money on our defense budget because everybody else is gonna pony that up. And I think that's why Trump and Orban are looked at like, oh, you know, these guys are assholes. Well, but why? Because they're putting the interests of their country ahead of this organization. Yeah, that's just the way life is. So it's sad that this even has to be discussed in these terms. But it's interesting. So it's good to keep an eye on that type of stuff. But let's talk about like money on our end too.
Before you go into that though, just before you go into the money on our end, there was just two comments that came in that echoed what you're saying. Again, like I think I shouldn't say everyone, but I think if you are taking a step back and you're paying attention, it's kind of obvious that this is an extortion scheme. It's a racket. Again, we just had two comments came in kind of saying the same thing, slightly different perspective. But I not saying it because they're agreeing with us, but I mean, I agree with them. I mean, how else do you describe it, P. Rick, before you go into our side of it? What else what do you call that then?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I think it's a racket on a lot of ends too, because for us to provide all this military support to this foreign organization, we call it a foreign org because it is. We're part of it, but our own military industrial complex is, licking their chops. Hey, Iraq, Afghanistan wound down. Oh, hey, Ukraine. Hey, here's a new revenue stream for us, right? Yeah. That's it's insidious. I hope that the new administration comes in and takes a very strong look at this and looks at the contracts that we have. If you ever look at, and I've brought this up before on a previous podcast, if you ever look at like the senior board members of like, Raytheon, Lockheed, companies like that, there's a lot of former like general officers that comprise, those boards, at least in an advisory status. Yeah. Why is that? How did that happen? How did General or Admiral so and so retire, and then the very next week starts working for this massive defense contractor? That's weird, for six figures, because they were setting themselves up in advance, right, to kind of keep this stuff going, and the under the table handshakes were being made. It's disgusting, and it needs to be cleaned up because this is our taxpayer money, and we should be vigilant about this stuff and calling it out.
And this is where I didn't want to get us into the weeds, so I'm just going to kind of throw it out there, though. But like this nexus, this point of intersection that P. Rick is just mentioning right there, it isn't just NATO. We're focusing on NATO, but that graft and corruption. I mean, look, there's no doubt about it that Ukraine has turned into a money laundering scheme for very wealthy individuals from the United States and from other locations, right? And how much of that is aided and embedded by NATO officials, to that note, right? So,
Well, and I just want to say too how convenient it is that, and it's not just in our country either, because you do have defense manufacturers in other countries too they're doing okay. I mean, and I would even argue people from different countries come and join our companies. But what is striking to me is how when you look at the portfolios, as Patrick had mentioned, you ever notice how these people, they go from the military and then they go to these companies, and then somehow, and this isn't a uniquely American thing, but we notice it because this is where we live. Gee, how is it that they end up in, like, defense secretary position, and they have a portfolio where they were making bank?
Yep.
Clearly they're not going to make any decisions of our national security that's going to pad their pocket before they save the lives of Americans. I mean, the whole thing from the top down, like, is just such a disgusting, vomit inducing racket that it, like, any person who looks at this monstrosity should be like, that needs to go away. Like, it really does. And it's
so just real quickly, if we do a little rabbit hole, let's not be afraid of the rabbit hole, though, right? Like, nothing wrong with the rabbit hole, but like that. But to your point, the reason I just wanted to say it is because that monstrosity you're talking about is actually just one of the tentacles of the greater, larger monstrosity that has somehow been created in the Western nations. Somehow, in the last, 40 years or whatever it's been, somehow that kind of shit has been allowed to run roughshod and be the norm. Big defense industry, politicians, look, there's not an NGO out there that's an actual, oh, well, we're all poor like Mark. No, dude, like you said, like, and if you get into the defense industry and shit, I'm like, oh, come on, man,
The next Speaker of the House was a defense industry insider, whoever was, like.
Well, or hang on, Redbeard, or that person's husband or wife is like a major broker.
They have definitely ironed out the details when it comes to, like, all right, honey, like, I have to quit my job at Raytheon, but it's a good thing you're married to me because you can take my spot. So we'll continue to have a padded life while I run the country, right? It's just, oh my goodness.
It's laughable. On the government side, every so many years you have to fill out a financial disclosure form, and hey, here's how much I made, from the government, if I have any outside employment in my household, to make sure that there's not some kind of undue influence on you as a government employee. Yet the senior people at the top, it's just it's a joke.
Well, dude, hang on, and now rabbit hole. And that eye patch wearing rhino mother effer, Dan Crenshaw, in that interview he did earlier this week or last week, talking about, it's so rough being, politician. If we're not allowed to do training or trading, how are we ever supposed to get ahead in this job? Did you make 170 a year? Like, I know I've lived in DC. I know it's expensive, bro. I didn't make that much and I still found a way to do it. But he's literally in front of the camera saying, how else are we as politicians supposed to get ahead in this racket if we're not able to use our positions for our personal gain? He literally had the balls. Like, come on. I'm so disappointed. I don't even remember what state he's from. Whatever, if you're watching this, whatever people from that state, you got to vote that motherfucker out. We as Americans need to vote all of those people out. I know, rabbit hole, but just to our point, they're not even hiding it anymore. They're coming out and saying, well, how am I supposed to be a multimillionaire if I'm not doing insider trading or if you're not laundering money to Ukraine?
That's a guarantee of the office or something.
Well, and there's such an irony in the fact too that, like, we have people like Lindsey Graham of all people who sit there and they're like, oh, these Russian oligarchs, Bob. It's like, my guy, you are the oligarch. Like, what about this? Don't you understand? Like, you are the pot calling the kettle black. It's like, I'm not even saying that there aren't extensive issues in Russia or Ukraine or whatever. Like, every country has them, but let's not sit here and try and hit them, the ethical or moral high ground when you are exactly the archetype that you're depicting somewhere else. Like, at what point does it does the irony just break the image? And it's like, hey, that's me, like
Yeah.
these two things are the same.
Angry Viking just chimed in. He said, "Hit that damn Crenshaw. He is from Texas." That's true.
I popped it up there. Yeah, I popped it up there.
You know,
but hey, AVB's other point. Again, I think it's still good. Like, how are we? Like, I get it. This, we're a representative government, and these are our elected officials. But it does seem at some point there's got to be other checks and balances in there.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't get to just go there and then just go against the will of the people. Now, the argument would be, well, if they do that, then they get then they don't make they don't get reelected to office, right? Next time around. I mean, yeah, I guess. But once you get in there and that money is so deep, I do think we should add. I don't see, because what's wrong with another check and balance? There's nothing wrong with making it difficult, because if we really want to do it and we're all unanimous on it, we're all in agreement, this is for the betterment of the country, we'll do it through all 4 checks and, checks, whatever. But right now we've got one check. You got elected, and then now you got Dan Crenshaw, whether you like him or, love him or leave him, there for 6 years. Yeah, right. He's the senator, right? Isn't he, or is he a rep? I can't remember what he is, but yeah. So whatever, 4, 6 year, whatever his tenure is. But he's going to be there, and he's going to be doing everything that Dan Crenshaw and all of these slimy people want to do for themselves to make their money. So even if they don't get reelected, I'm thinking of that guy from New York who didn't get reelected, that Democrat, the guy who pretended he didn't know what a fire alarm was,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't. Yeah. But look, do you think he cares? That guy is set for the rest of his life.
Let's talk about, for a second, about Dan Crenshaw and people like him, right? So there's a big push, and I tend to agree with it, that people that have military service or served as first responders, they need to enter the field of politics. So you're bringing forth a career of experience, and you've proven that, hey, I will serve something outside of me. When you get elected in these positions, the question is, did Dan Crenshaw, I'm sure his background as a Navy SEAL didn't hurt his election prospects, right? Did he have this in him before he took office, or did the exposure to the corruption, did he fall into it, right?
I think he had it in him beforehand. That's why he wanted to do that.
Yeah. To the listeners, I'll say this: a lot of times people, laud, praise on folks because, oh, hey, this guy was a Navy SEAL, he was a Green Beret, he was Delta Force, he was a Marine, blah 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 blah, all these different things, right? People are people. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your pedigree is. It comes down to that individual and who they are and their character. And I will tell you point blank, I worked, and Mark knows a large part of this. I worked with people at the agency that came from these organizations and the DOD, and some of them were straight criminals. Just straight criminals, thugs. But now if they were to go to some place, in a rural area and run for, to be a congressman, that sounds really great. Hey, this guy's, pro 2A, he's very conservative. Great. But now you get him in there and this is what you get, right? It's disgusting. So be mindful of that, and don't just take people on pedigree the next election cycle.
Just on a stupid little small side story, I remember I'm out of the agency, and I'm having a conversation with 2 gentlemen who I had known in the military. Both are in law enforcement. One was in federal, one was in local law enforcement. And they just kept becoming really surprised that I didn't have all kinds of shit. Like, I didn't just take stuff with me. Like, you don't have your own nods? I'm like, those weren't my nods. I mean, I was using the world's best nods at the time and lasers and all that, but that wasn't my shit. I can't keep that. But to the point we're getting at again, but they're doing it with all of their issued equipment. It's theirs as far as they're concerned. And if something goes missing or if they use it, I mean, literally taking that stuff out and using it, it was just disgusting, as you said. So I'm just bringing that up, P. Rick, to your point where it's like, just because somebody was a this, that, or the other thing, we're all just people. And, I saw somebody talking about something the other day, and I'm like, and I just kind of remember saying to myself, there's a housewife, a single mother who is working her ass off and working harder and has more balls than this other guy that you're putting up on a pedestal just because, whatever, like you just said, like,
I'd rather see her in office representing people because she's like in touch with reality and the common person.
Yeah.
Well, and then so on that note, I don't think we're the common person, and I think this is by design with so many issues. But here on NATO, and that's why to me, I think this is imperative. We kind of joked in the pregame that I was going to have. Here's the top 5. I don't know if I could. I didn't write it down, guys, so I'll see if I'll remember the top 5. If I was president, here's the top 5 things I get done on day one. We had this list. But getting out of NATO was number 5. I think it was prosecuting all the people who've lied and committed treason against America. Again, within our judicial system or court of law, but I think that is there. Pardoning the January 6th, full disclosure on full disclosure. No, as a matter of fact, you have Kash Patel or whomever else or who's going to run the agency. Strike down all because we over classify way too much stuff, right? So that's got to come. So these would be the things, and then and then it's like, oh yeah, and then we're going to leave NATO like that. That would be like my number one. If I could get those 5 taskers done on day one in office, I'd feel pretty good about myself.
So something, that, and Mark, I've talked to you about this before, and I've probably brought it up when Patrick's been on, but when I really think about the core of the NATO conversation, I think that I personally believe that the dissolution of NATO is the benefit of everybody. It's not just us. Like the money transfer from us to NATO wouldn't just get better because it's not there anymore. But we've talked. There's been a theme with the NATO conversation, and that's sovereignty. I want to see these countries stand on their own again, and that doesn't mean that they'll be alone. It doesn't mean we can't trade with them or go and train with them every once in a while or whatever the case is. We can still have those meaningful relationships, but we're already to a point to where we've established those connections. We don't need something to bind us all together, and especially one that really kind of usurps their sovereignty and being like, look, like, oh, if you're not going to do this, then we're just going to punish you. Like, no, like that's not how you build a good relationship. If anything, what we're seeing is the countries that are being lambasted, and Slovakia has been one of them. Recently, within the past week, Fico from Slovakia actually went over to Moscow and be like, hey, we need gas. Like, I don't care what goes on between you and Ukraine. Like, we need gas, otherwise we're going to freeze, right? They have to go and make deals, and he's caught flack for that, the same way that Hungary has, and some of these other countries, like they are finally doing what they need to do to survive. And I think that if NATO goes away, very few people, we've been talking about these people all night, very few people are actually going to cry when it happens, because the common man, in the end of the day, is they're going to get more power of what goes on in their country's back, and it's not influenced by this huge monolithic entity. And unfortunately, those oligarchs, Lindsey Graham, they're not going to be getting a kickback, and I'm okay with that, because that means that he's got to go somewhere, and as long as he's not by me, it is what it is. Maybe we can even actually have some clarity and honesty in the United States. Look, for me, this whole conversation, and I'll yield the floor here, I just want to see Europe take its roots back. I want to see Finns be Finns again, Brits be Brits again, Germans be Germans again. I want to see all these countries stand on their own. I want nothing but the best for these countries, because we've seen how they can be on their own, and we've seen how they can be with meaningful relationships. We don't need NATO to do that. So.
I unfortunately think as we bring it over to PRIC, that's going to be very difficult, just simply because the graft and the corruption is so deep. Like, it's organizational essence, being a, being a goon squad that's, a racketeering organization that's just making money for it. It's going to be hard for people to give up. So on that note, as we bring it to PRIC, if there is more kind of conversation about open, dialogue, which there should be, all of this should be transparent. I mean, the budget, all this stuff should be transparent. But if we get that and you see people complaining, I think that's going to be telling. To your point, I think the average person is going to be, yeah, why are we there? Why is so? Because again, I was about to, and I'll read this in a second about how much more money we're about to give to Ukraine, where the average American is having, fucking almost $6 a dozen eggs. How are you going to justify this? And then to Angry Viking Veterans comment here, here, I'll just pop it up. I'll read it and then I'll bring it over to you, P-Rick. There's no reason the government can't let the citizenry vote on a spending referendum, after X billions of dollars for wars has been spent after X 100%. Billions of dollars have been spent for wars that haven't even been declared. Yeah, you're fucking right. I mean, that pisses my ass off. So how is that even possible? I mean, I get it. I mean, I know how it is, executive powers, this, that, the Senate and the, Congress, but really, I just kind of think it just, P-Rick bringing it to you, it really just stinks. And it just looks so bad. So everybody is saying 2.5 billion is what Biden just gave a couple days ago. That's incorrect. No, I was going to say, but but the media is trying to bullshit everybody. That 2.5 billion, B as in Bravo, billion, that's on the military side. And then it's like 3.6 on the economic side. So it's basically $6 billion on the way out. And how much of that money is going to get laundered back into, like you said, McCain. Well, see, there you go. He was a rhino too, but Graham and the Biden crime family and Pelosi and Dan Crenshaw and all those motherfuckers, that $6 billion. Yeah. Hang on. I'll bring it to P-Rick, but Jeremy, I know you're going to want to kind of get at this as well. Yeah. Why are we given $6 billion? How is that money being accounted for? And are the people giving that money the same people who haven't made an audit? The Pentagon, who failed every audit for the last 8 years. Hold it. Is that what's really going on here, man? Why are we doing this?
Well, and I just want to say too, have you ever noticed too that all of a sudden after the first year and a half of the war in Ukraine went on, that they just stopped calling for audits to figure out where any of this stuff is going. It's not even publicly being talked about anymore. It's just just don't. It doesn't even matter anymore. It's no, it still matters. This 100% still matters, and that's notwithstanding. And I'll let Patrick have it after this. When we look at not just us but NATO as a whole, look at if we're talking audits, let's have an honest conversation about how low the stockpiles are from NATO countries of feeding them military supplies and just a military aspect. I mean, it's not even being hidden anymore by some of the higher echelon politicians in these countries, notwithstanding our own, of the fact that many of these stockpiles are almost down to nothing. They could not last a couple months in an armed conflict, which is another reason why these countries should not be in NATO, notwithstanding us. Because if they weren't in NATO, you know what they'd still have? They'd still have an economy, and they'd still have their military stockpiles, at least where they were before Ukraine. And so it's a detrimental situation all around, and nobody's even asking questions about it anymore. It's just out there. So I'll yield the floor to you, Patrick.
Yeah, no, that's that 100% spot on. I'll pick up from that, and then I want to back up a second, but to just pick up the fraud, waste, and abuse. And again, I was over there 2 years ago on active duty, working with all of our partners over there, all of our NATO partners, and different elements of the U.S. military. The fraud, waste, and abuse was thick and heavy, all over the place, and to the point where you're wondering how is this possible? I mean, you've got number one, the contract staff that a lot of these people would employ. It was insane, and these are people that are making if the GS pay scale, we're talking high GS 13 all the way up to 15s. And these are positions that should be, manned by, when I say manned, but filled with military members. There's no reason that couldn't be the case, right? It just creates this massive fraud, waste, and abuse. And those people, their interest is not in furthering the mission. It's more in, hey, I'm going to stay in my big cushy job and live in Europe for X amount of years, right? It's disgusting. Let's back up for a second, though. And it's not just that; it's the money and the resources we're pouring into the Ukrainian military. You know, for folks that don't know, like, you know, we train the Ukrainian military in bases in Europe, right? When I say military, I use that term very lightly. It's like, hey, you go, you know, in some major urban area or just any urban area, you go on a street block, and you pull out every military age male and say, hey, you guys, you know, fall out on the street. You're now like, you know, Main Street Company, and you guys are like 23rd Street Company, and they, you know, form them together. Hey, put on these uniforms. We're going to meet at this place. We're going to give you some very, very cursory military training, and off you go. It's a joke, and a lot of them use the old school. I mean, they still use like a Soviet fighting style where only the senior commanders and the senior NCOs know what the battle plan is. So if they get smoked, the rest of the soldiers are blind. They don't know what the hell the plan is, where they're going, how to evacuate. It's a complete farce. I mean, you'd be better off like training a group of Boy Scouts over here. You'd be more successful. I tell you that much. Let's back it up to the other thing we're talking about, like if we withdraw from NATO, second and third order effects. So for us, maybe that's good because we're going to save a lot of money that we don't have to give NATO, and maybe we can focus on, I don't know, defending our own borders. What a crazy concept that would be. But if you do that, and you know, I'm Hans sitting in Germany. I'm an average citizen. Now all of a sudden, my government says, "Oh shit, the U.S. just pulled all this massive amount of money out of this. Now we've got to like increase our national defense budget ourselves." Boom, taxes go way up, and there's a lot of like social, you know, if you want to call them social programs in Europe that give people stipends for living and stuff like that. Germany specifically, some of the service industry place like restaurants and bars and things like that, the service is terrible because they're not working to keep you as a customer. They get, you know, money on the side from the government. So hey, I don't give a shit if you get your beer, you know, as soon as you walk in or 30 minutes later. Who cares? It's all the same to me. But those people are now going to be paying out their nose, or some of those stipends are going to disappear to go towards a defense budget. That's going to cause massive issues. And because they've been in this like liberal mindset and like, you know, peace, love, and, you know, harmony, because the U.S. is taking care of us, there's going to be like revolts over that shit. So it's just a topple, you know, think of dominoes like knocking each other down. It's going to be funky for us. Everybody's got their national interest. Fantastic. Watch the second and third order effects if that takes place.
And I just want to add quickly to what you were saying, and then I'll yield to you, Mark. You know, real quick on the Ukraine recruiting situation. I don't know if you and Mark, I know Mark has. I haven't talked to you for a while, Patrick, but you know, how is it that NATO can just sit back also, these countries who, you know, talk about the moral high ground, and they just are like, oh no, it's perfectly fine watching you, you know, some of your, you know, your gang members run out in the streets and chase down, you know, 20-something-year-olds and throw them into a van. And after beating the shit out of them and sending them to the front lines with not even a day's worth of training, like this is, where's the moral imperative? And I'm happy you even brought up, you know, something touching on that, because the videos are all over now. It's, you can't even not see it. And it's wild to me how you have people in these countries, they're like, it's not happening. It's Russian propaganda. It's like, except for the fact that like this guy's mom just filmed this happen to him, and she's screaming because she knows her son's never coming back, you know, like, and you're talking about second and third order effects. Well, let's look at when we sabotaged the initial agreement the Russians and the Ukrainians had until Boris Johnson and Nuland told them not to take it. You know, all of this could have been prevented if we hadn't, you know, if we hadn't in the first place told them, no, just keep fighting. We'll back you up. And then, you know, hundreds of thousands of people dead later, you know, and it's like, oh, this is fine. You know, and just real quick to the last point that you made, the second and third order effects for, you know, different countries, if we back out, I mean, look, in the end of the day, like this may be the push that a lot of them need to revitalize their economy and revitalize their military. This could be the thing for the people to actually take the power back that's been taken from them to begin with. I mean, so it's going to be chaotic and it's going to be turbulent. But like I said earlier, I really do hope that these countries, they get away from NATO, they stand on their own. And look, when you guys are looking for support, you want to do business, you want us to work with you, not in a permanent alliance, because we all know about entangling alliances, but like, look, we can be diplomatic. We'll do that, but you guys deserve so much better over in Europe, notwithstanding our own problems. And it breaks my heart to see the common person be exploited by this organization. And that's not even touching on what the EU does. I mean, I feel like where one exists, the other's there too. So
I think they are definitely hand in glove, or they become, or maybe they're, molded at the hip, something. But the EU and NATO, their organizational essence, their who they are, what they stand for, the leadership, the mindset, the programming, the messaging. It's pretty much like, if you didn't see a title, you'd be like, like, matter of fact, that'd be a good man on the street game. All right, who said this? Was it the EU or was it NATO? And people would be like, I got a 50-50 chance. I don't know. It could have been either one of them. So
show me the difference between these two pictures. There is none,
Yeah, there is none. Right. Exactly. Hey, go ahead,
Mark, I'm bring one more thing up on that note. So, like, ever since the Ukraine crisis or whatever we're calling it happened, look at what our adversaries have done, right? Yeah. So they've formed their own partnership. So Russia and China said, hey, look, you know what? We're going to support each other. And guess who else they have in the mix? It's BRICS, right? So they've got India, Brazil, and South Africa, and these are traditionally, India, Brazil, and South Africa are countries that are usually, good trade relationships with, partnerships with, that type of thing. And now, how's that going to, how's this going to play out? We're if you're doing the same thing that NATO did, or UN, you're moving, your stuff into other countries, you're, prepositioning military assets and that type of thing. And it sets the stage for, the rest of, the forms of warfare, the dime, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. So they make
you had a kind of point as we're going this in, kind of, it ties in with what both you guys are saying, that other entity, that that nation state that may have approached things differently, so again, I mean, for me, constitutionally, going back to another thing AVV brought up, like, I don't know, it was clear our founding fathers did not want us to be in any type of binding alliances. Redbeard's kind of said this, AVV's alluding to this in a couple of his comments in the chat. Hey, there's nothing that says we can't be buddies. You got my phone number, I got your phone number, maybe we can be doing a trade. Hey, Redbeard and I were talking about this about 2 weeks ago, just about something different. Yeah, and it's just like, hey, why can't you even do trade with the guy? Like, I don't have to get along with you. You're like, I've got a bunch of water bottles, or whatever. You want some? Yeah, okay. We don't have to. That doesn't mean I condone your government or condone your, there's nothing that says we can't do that, except for what you guys are kind of implying.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's just really morphed on so many levels. The EU, NATO, our Congress, I mean, quite honestly, most of our elected representatives, I mean, again, a little bit of a rabbit hole, get your, explore the rabbit hole t-shirt or hat on right now. But if you just even look at, over the last couple of years, thank God for this medium, for technology and phones and all this, we see how these local city boards or county boards and how they act and how they treat the citizenry and how they don't know the first thing about the Constitution and they don't give a fuck about it. You're out there and you've got the ability to exercise free speech, and somebody in the town board doesn't like it and they turn off your mic and have the cops escort you up. This happened. So this is, to me, NATO is just like, the big boil, the big thing that needs to should be excised. It should be lanced or something. It's gonna spread and take over your face, and it's a symptom, right? there's a major rot, and hopefully you guys are right, and we as a people start standing up and and speaking out against this. I haven't heard anyone, it was barely mentioned. It's happening so much, we're being numb to it. $6 billion more dollars going to Ukraine when the American economy is right on the precipice. People are fucking struggling, and then you just look at the comments that, Gene and some of the other guys have made talking about, their vets, are homeless and don't get any support or anything but then that political elite class of the government, because they like NATO, because it's just a big money laundering scheme, a racketeering scheme, they don't care because they got theirs. Dan Crenshaw, well, how else am I going to make a shit ton of money if I don't, do this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Hey, on an interesting note with that, I think there was 2 UFCs ago, if anybody watches that, there was a advertisement from some company. I forget the name of them, but their tagline was something like "Invest like a politician."
Oh, that's rich.
I'm not sure how to take that. Would that mean recklessly and with other people's money? I mean,
I think what they were doing, somebody talked to me about this. It was, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the company, but they would track the investments of all these different elected officials and say, okay, hey, here's the trends of what these people are putting their money in. Maybe you should too.
Well, I mean, I know there's been a mashup on this, to your point. Now I understand what you're saying. But there's very few politicians who are losing money in the stock market. That. Oh, I'm on a commission. I'm on a board. I know this, and then all that insider trading and all that shit taking place. And so again, down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it's still the same. It's the same conversation. It's the same truth. Yeah. Why are we in NATO? Why are we letting these people do this stuff? Why are these, folks? I mean, you and I would be arrested, go back, see some of our other, episodes. I mean, I'm still to this day, I'm incredibly embarrassed and pissed off about the absolute disregard and reckless, just in your face violation of a lot of our national security, and the things that Rick and I would have definitely been breaking big rocks into little rocks into smaller rocks. We would have been in big effing trouble if we would have done one little thing. And here's people just flaunting it. I mean, Joe Biden had classified documents in his garage. He's never once in his political career, except where he is right now as president, had the ability to declassify anything or take any of that stuff home. That somebody took that intentionally out of a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized facility, like a super secret little room, where no electronics and eavesdropping get in, and all the computers are on a closed, net type of thing. That somebody printed that shit out, and whether it was Joe Biden or somebody else, and then they gave it to Joe Biden, and he was storing it in his garage. Patrick and I would have been, Rick, I mean, you want to jump on that? Because I know that's a little bit of the rabbit hole, but it's the same thing about NATO. Is Turkey going to somehow draw us into a conflict where we're supporting a terrorist organization? Why would we ever
Ottoman Empire, Mark,
such a thing?
The Ottoman Empire that Turkey wants it to be again. Yeah. Let's call it what it is. Let's call a spade. And I see Patrick nodding his head. I don't know about you, but I've heard a lot of people insinuate that Erdogan really has a hard-on for his old Ottoman days. So, just going to put that out there. We saw where that led the last time they came around.
I don't know if anyone knows what Redbeard's talking about, but just go do your own research. So the leader of Turkey, Erdogan, he really has a thing for the historical Ottoman Empire. Yeah. And I mean, he's got palace guards dressed up like it. He's made it,
it's wild, dude.
Speeches and everything. And this is a member of NATO. So again, why are we in an alliance? Well, with one of our alliance members right now is supporting with a group whose leaders we classified as terrorists. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'd be scratching my head saying, "Hang on a second, I think I want to reevaluate this relationship."
And to be fair, take this for what you will. I'm not endorsing anybody, but if I was the group of people that just assumed power in Syria based on Erdogan's track record, I'd watch my back because you're not safe.
Oh no, he's coming for them. I think.
Of course he is.
Yeah. It's all a big land grab, power grab.
Of course.
Hey, boys and girls, I just had a private chat. P. Rick very politely just sent me a private chat. You're going to have to bounce here in a couple minutes.
Yeah, here in a few. Yeah.
Right. So why don't we bring it back over to P. Rick for some final closing thoughts, whatever the case is.
Yep.
Hey, maybe this Friday, maybe we're going to start 2025 with actually 2 rather, shorter episodes. Last night was an hour, and maybe tonight will be an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we won't try pulling some Joe Rogan bullshit and do 4 hours. I'm telling you, boys, well, anybody watching, boys and girls, if you're watching, but for these guys, I'm just getting old, and I'm all my shit, and I'm so broken. I was saying it to Redbeard before you came on, P. Rick. I'm like, man, this new time, everybody likes it, but I don't. Like, I'm like, it's like 1930. I'm like, I should be thinking about bed right now. I'm fucking old, dude, old and broken. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, so kind of back tracking what Redbeard was talking about, the accountability, right? Whether we're talking about accountability for individual, politicians in the United States or wherever you're from, I think that's the price that we, have to pay as responsible citizens, is to be vigilant and call this stuff out, be vocal, right? Yeah. And base it on people's performance and their actions and not personality, right? Hey, there's a lot of people that I don't like, maybe personally I wouldn't go have a beer with them, but as far as like their record for, taking action or voting on certain things or taking a stance, okay, I respect that, right? But that also applies to nation states, right? So Turkey and others that, hey, you step out of line, you receive benefits from, our country and others. And now all of a sudden you're partnering with different, terrorist organizations. I mean, I've seen numerous videos of U.S. service members being attacked and assaulted. Yeah. It's almost like
in Turkey. You're talking in Turkey.
Yeah.
You're talking about in Turkey.
Yeah, in Turkey. Yeah.
Yeah, in Turkey. Yep. By Turkish citizens. Yep.
Yeah, sailors, airmen, that type of thing. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So that's something that we need to hold people accountable, not just at the individual level, but also at the like I said, the nation state level too, and hell, even organizational, right? Within our own country, there's certain groups that get funded that, hey, what is your purpose? What are you? I think that's what Doge is. Going to be a good thing if they execute properly. Like, let's look at like major organizations that suck up a lot of money, but little return on investment. And I think that's what you're going to get from guys coming from those backgrounds. The last thing I'll bring up tonight, and maybe this sets something up. There's Mark, you're making people drink like crazy tonight, man.
Hey, they can take little sips. That's all I'm doing. I'm just taking, come on, control it. You do you.
Yeah.
But hey, if you've got nothing else to do tomorrow and you're doing a full fucking, a full shot every time I come, I'm just taking a sip.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll end with this, man.
Again, I'm old and it's past my bedtime.
In light of recent events, we've seen obviously the terror attacks in the U.S. On New Year's Day. We're going to see more. Yes. You can't let the number of people into the country not knowing who they are, where they're from, on the promise that they're going to appear in some courtroom someday and not think you're going to get attacked. It's going to happen. I'll say this: that's on an individual level. The best thing you can do is keep your wits about you, keep your head on a swivel when you're out in public, and stay off the damn phone. Know your environment.
Can you hold that for your actual outro? I want you to address AVV's comment about, are we just throwing good money after bad? So if you got a little bit of time, the media seems to have a blackout on the whole war. And Redbeard and I talk about this extensively, but let's give you the chance, like your thoughts on that. And then we can kind of go into it. I think that's important. People hear what you were just saying too, but I, maybe one last comment is, your thoughts on, are we just throwing, and again, that's the whole thing of NATO. I would argue, yes, AVV, we're throwing bad money after bad ideas all the friggin' time right now in our media. Back to the larger tentacles, the League of Shadows, they're totally in on. I mean, again, how many companies or who owns almost all of our media? You just go back and look at that. We don't even have independent. The independent media, and that's why they hate it. It really is Twitter. It really is this. It really is people with cell phones. I think that's a lot of truth. And that's why, they've got to shut people up, plain and simple. So, P. Rick.
Yep. From a U.S. perspective, we are throwing money into an empty hole, an endless hole, right? We're paying for the defense budget of, let's just call it most of Europe, almost all of Europe, right? how does that impact us? That's something that we have to take a strong look at while we can't even protect our own country. This is something that hopefully is changing. We've got to take I'm hoping that number one of the first things aside from securing the border that the new administration comes in, they revisit. I'm sure that they've already addressed this. What is our next step forward with Ukraine? Because it can't be this endless pit of money. No. There has to be an agreement. There has to be an end of conflict, and that's it. And if that equates to Ukraine giving up some of their territory to stop their citizens from being attacked and murdered, then that's what they should do. That's their best interest, not to just fight to the bloody end and suck up as much U.S. money and munitions as they can. That's no good for anybody. So it's good. I guess it's good for the military industrial complex that creates that stuff, but that's really it. So 100%, that's a waste of money. The atrocities that took place over there, accountability seems to be like one of the themes of this discussion tonight. So all that stuff needs to be documented, and I'm sure there were plenty of war crimes. If there's any way possible to hold those accountable on the Russian military that did that, or anybody that assisted the Russian military, maybe they should be held accountable. I'm not a big believer that that's going to be a deterrent. It's not. It's an after the fact type thing, So that's we are wasting a lot of money though. This should have been over a long time ago. They should have been brought to the table. Concessions should have been made. It should be over.
It never should have happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Arrogant. I know everything. Ivy Tower fucking, diplomats, politicians, our better class of, that they think they are, who have no real world experiences, were poking their hand and, trying to reach into, the honey jar, the cookie jar, whatever you want to say. And, and like literally, and I'm on the record saying this. So like my way of trying to dumb it down is, so in the state of Minnesota, for the use of lethal force, certain conditions have to be met. And one of those conditions is that you are an innocent party. And there's the definition of it. But imagine if you go in, like, if I start pissing, on Redbeard's head and he yells at me and punches me and then I shoot him, I'm not an innocent party. I kind of provoked that. If you do your own research, and I really, no one's ever going to see these videos. I mean, because censorship's real on our side too, right? And but if people get out there and do their own research, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to fly a Ukrainian flag. Do you even have any idea what's going on? You're probably the same person who was wearing a mask, and maybe are still wearing a mask to this day. So so back to AVV and to your point, P. Rick. I mean, like, I think it is. It's bad after bad, and it's going to hurt to 100%. Stop it. But what else what are we going to do? Just continue doing this for the next, fucking 20 years, I mean, because that's what we've always done. That's bullshit.
Well, and how much of the money that we're putting forward is actually helping the Ukrainian citizens rebuild and reorganize lives, right? That's the question. If I'm a leader of a country, that's my number one concern, because those are the people that put me in power, not just, continuing this battle that's going to go on forever and, cause continuous loss of life.
Yeah.
Well, and then Redbeard, after P. Rick, let's maybe you and I wrap up this whole NATO thing, the empathy and the human life perspective, because I'm glad P. Rick just mentioned that. That's, again, so back to AVV's point and this, what does appear to be a media blackout. Like, the only thing you ever see are, like, completely pro-Ukrainian, huge propaganda pieces, like on that point. Why in the fuck can't I see RT? Why?
Yeah.
Why can't somebody watch RT? I'm an American citizen. What do you mean? You're like, you can't show that, or if you do this in Europe or the EU or NATO's going to spank you. Like, that's up for me to decide. Maybe I want to gather information. I want to see what Lavrov is saying, or I want to da-da-da-da-da. No.
And I just want
you and I save that. Let's save that. But P. Rick, I wanted, you kind of see where I'm getting at.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that kind of sets you up for what you're going. Because
I'm going to go into I was going to go in a different direction, but
but my point is, these things are real. This evil, we're talking about NATO. This evil's there, and we're on a larger kind of conversation right now that none of us, honestly, are going to be the ones that resolve. Now, we can be outspoken and we can protest and speak our, and express our opinions on it, publicly via legitimate protest, and maybe we should. But we're not the people in this administration or whatever who's going to make that call. But if you take that down to our level, kind of what you were getting at, that's where we can make an impact, and that's where we can have
Right.
that's where we can have an impact.
Yep, absolutely. I was just going to wrap it up by talking about, hey, we've had the terrorist attacks happen on New Year's Day. We're going to continue to see terrorist attacks happen, not just in the U.S. We're going to see them in Europe and all over the world because the vacuum's been created for, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Boko Haram, you name it. All of them are going to, they've been emboldened over the past, 4 years. So we're going to see more of that. The one thing that I'd like to bring up is, look, terrorism is a tactic. It's not a nation state war. And you can go, hey man, we spent time in, Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would argue that Afghanistan, if we would have handled that correctly, we probably could have closed that out in a successive fashion, but we didn't. Oh, yeah. We bloated everything out like we always do. Anyway, my point is I'm hoping that none of this creates, a situation where we're sending our military off to foreign places to fight terrorists because they're all over the world. It's an ideology. It's a tactic. You're never going to stamp it out. There's always going to be something new. So I'll just leave it at that. Maybe that opens something up for another time. But yeah, that's something, again, for accountability. We've got to think rationally and not just, go with our heart. Like, okay, let's go crush all of them. Well, they're all over the world and you never know when they're going to pop up. So that's impossible.
Well, and maybe one of your techniques, instead of just saying we're just going to go crush them, is maybe you should take a step back, kind of like what we're talking about with NATO, and say, why are we even doing this to begin with? Why is it that this guy or this group is pissed off at me and is trying to conduct attacks against me, asymmetric terrorist type of attacks? Why is that even happening? What are the root causes? If the root causes, if it comes all the way down and the very root causes, I don't like the color of your skin or I don't like your religion, okay, then you've got a different issue. But I think like with NATO, a lot of these root causes are, well, like you keep pissing in my backyard or your dog shitting in my driveway. It's a lot of that shit that you can, once you identify it by having a conversation, you're like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have my dog in your, and if you kill my dog, if you say, hey, your dog keeps taking a shit in my yard and you don't do anything about it and the neighbor kills your yard, that's going to be a crime in today's society. But let's be honest, like, what did you think the neighbor was going to do? At some point, the neighbor's going to get pissed off and he's going to or he's going to just hire a manure truck and just dump a shit ton of manure in your driveway or something like that.
That's right.
Yep. So with that, gents, I'm going to have to sign off, but I want to thank you guys for having me on again.
Great to see you, brother.
I think this has been informative and it's been fun for me. So hopefully it's been good for the viewers too.
Yeah.
Hey, next week, just to let you know, if you got the chance to watch, we're going to finish up. Well, I think you're I think you're doing something next week because that's why I've got DB and another person. We're going to finish up the Benghazi and the Coast conversation. Okay. But if I remember right, you're gone. But
I think so. Yeah, that's subject to change. But for right now, that's the case.
Okay, well, maybe we can chat about that because if you're available, we'll have you back on for that. But but I like that kind of last comment, what you're alluding to, and that's going to maybe happen. Maybe we'll even get you come over on Millstone, on one of our Millstone Mondays, because you're absolutely right. This isn't going to go away. As much as I want NATO to go away, the events of the next 30, 180 days, it's going to be pretty frosty. You got to be pretty frosty. It's going to be tumultuous. Head on a swivel, stay frosty, situation awareness. So maybe in one of these Monday episodes, we can have you come on and just talk a little bit about that, a little bit more of the reality of terrorism, what it means in your hometown. And, again, like Stanley Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove, the subtitle was, it's the movie's Dr. Strangelove. And the subtitle was, how I learned to stop worrying and just love the bomb. Type of thing. So,
Awesome. All right, gents. Well, thank you again. Much
it's great to see you.
You got it. Thank you, P. Rick. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
See you later, bro.
Right. You got it. Have a good one. Enjoy your weekend. All right. So we got me and Redbeard left. We got Mike in the woods just chimed in. Hey, Mike, if you're willing to do it, do a little thing telling everybody where you're from. Trying to get everybody to, if you're watching, just chime in. Hey, I'm from here. I'm from there, whatever the case is. But nice to see you because I know where you're from and I know it's pretty late. So hopefully you just came back from the bars yourself or whatever. So the guys had a little drinking game going, in the earlier tonight, but all, of course, making fun of my awesome beard. But as we're wrapping up tonight, Redbeard, I'm just going to turn it over to you. If you want to go someplace where like what we were just talking about with P-Rick, again, kind of the comments that spurred that was AVV and Gene, their comments about sending all this money to Ukraine. The media seems to be covering up a blackout. Are we just good money after bad? And then Gene's comments also about look, it was the same thing with COVID, well, look, I mean, I know a bunch of people and I personally believe it. COVID was totally designed to destroy small business and get everything underneath a more corporate controllable umbrella. You can't have people out there, running their own shit, There you go. Mike chiming in. Mike's from Sweden, newly NATO. So catching it at the very end, Mike, at the very end here. We're talking shit about NATO. We don't like NATO. NATO, no bueno over here, brother.
Don't take this the wrong way, Mike, but my condolences to you. Hopefully Sweden gets some sense and they're like, this isn't the type of bar I want to hang out in.
Well, Sweden right now is running all kinds of things, trying to like what we've talked about. They're trying to figure out, do they, more cemetery space? Like, what kind of messaging is your leaders? You're like, why are you doing that? Why is a war inevitable? Like that just.
If you guys are that worried about it, here's what I would recommend. Okay. Up your civil defense program. Stop worrying about, what other people are doing and do everything you can to do right by your own people. It's the same stance that I take. The less money you put into NATO, the more you have for your own selfish defense. And in my opinion, that's the way it should be, right? Like if you're that worried about it, if you want to invest in defense, do it for yourself and not for anybody else. And on that note, though, I'm going to do a slight pivot unless you have something to add, Mark.
I just got to step away for a quick second. So
okay.
Pivot. But is your pivot going to get back to AVV and Gene's comments? Or
it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead. Pivot.
Yeah. So I'm just going to tee it up here quick. And Mark, I don't know if you can still hear me on this.
I can hear you, brother.
Okay, perfect. But so when we look at like the media blackout, and I don't know how many of you are super familiar with this gentleman that I'm about to talk about, but his name is Patrick Lancaster. He is an independent journalist that has gone around to various places around the world. He's covered the Ukraine crisis, I believe, since 2014 and its infant inception all the way up to the full-blown war that it is now. And he has provided perspective on the opposite side, because nobody does that. Nobody wants to, provide any insight to the Russian perspective. He's been embedded with the Russians. He's seen things from their side. He's provided coverage, and likewise, he's also been to the other side. And, it's amazing to me how a person who's simply trying to provide perspective, and when he does interviews, the interviews aren't about him. It's about getting their voices and their opinions in these interviews to capture what it is that they actually feel. And yet, this is an individual, well, he still actually has a fairly active YouTube channel. He uploads fairly regularly. He was just over in Georgia covering those protests or those you quote unquote protests. But he was covering that, and then he was, I believe, he's going back over to the front for the Ukraine-Russian conflict over there. He does a great job of laying out the opposite side and really allowing you to decide. And in every single one of his videos, he's like, look, I'm here to bring you their perspective, their side, to show you things on the other side. And it is up to you to do the research, to educate yourselves, and take this into account with everything else. And you have people that just immediately just shut him out or do everything they can to get him silenced, because they're like, oh, you're on the Russian, you're looking at things from the Russian side, so you're a propagandist. And he's like, no, I'm literally just here video recording what's going on their side. And, it's amazing that here in the US, we still get his content when we don't have the RT. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything he says or everything RT says, but we should be allowed to get all forms of information and be able to disseminate that and make up our own decisions the best way that we see fit. And that's notwithstanding, our friends on the podcast here from Europe. I firmly believe that the more information you guys have, the better informed your decisions are going to be, especially if they're more immediate decisions. We're we're in the United States. We're not even close to Russia, and you guys are. So it might be more pertinent for you to have more information regarding that matter. But the point remains the same. I firmly believe that having all of these resources at your disposal and not having this blackout is the best thing we possibly can. And when there is a blackout that's in effect, when they're not letting certain information through, I would only posit that you can expect a heavy amount of propaganda, a well-written or a poorly written narrative, depending on who's writing it, and an absolute, lack of transparency of anything that's going on. And it doesn't help you, it doesn't help us, and certainly doesn't help the situation. So I'm totally on board. Like I think when you look at how ostensible this is, quite frankly, I think the information aspect of it's probably one of the greatest casualties. And that's not diminishing the human life. It's just you can save human life the more information you have.
Well, so, and I'm not throwing Mike under the bus. He was asking that question. Well, what is that information going to? How's that information going to help?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Question.
I think he was just setting you up for maybe a baseball, but like the answer is like you don't know, but that's exactly it. So therefore, everything, like what is it going to do? It could change opinion. It could provide a different perspective. It could open doorways for diplomacy where they had otherwise been shut. It could get people to see this war or this conflict from a different perspective and maybe humanize it more. It might get people to not cheer and like they're watching like a Call of Duty video game, this is real. These are people, whether that's your adversary or not, so I think there's a lot. I think the more information, the better always. I mean, information, what is that stupid thing, Redbeard? Light is the light, information. Light is the best disinfectant. I mean, hands down, plain simple. If we only let the government or NATO spokespeople tell us that's what just happened. And Gene kind of made the thing about COVID. I'll just pop that up too. I mean, that's exactly, I think, the point. If we don't have information, I mean, just think if this election, you can vote for who you want. I mean, that's your point or whatever, but I really personally believe we've dodged 2 bullets in the last 8 to 12 years or so. We could have definitely been, and I'm not going to pick on other countries, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but there's some other Western countries that are very Orwellian right now, and we came really close to dodging that bullet because censorship is key. So again, Mike, we're not picking on you, but trying to answer the question. You have to have information. You have to have that ability, even if you don't disagree with it. If I disagree with Redbeard, which we do, then we have a conversation. Adults, we present our facts, we counter arguments, we talk it through, and then I'm not sure if I still see it your way, but okay, that was a pretty good point. And then, and if it's something, then we're like, okay, well then how do we fix it? Even though you and I disagree on what the cause was. Okay, but we both agree that this thing is there, NATO, and it needs to be fixed. Okay, so if you don't want to leave NATO, then how are we going to stay in NATO and make NATO relevant and make it efficient? Because NATO should be a war-fighting organization. I guess that would be my final. So again, information. Somebody wants to prove to me that NATO would be incredibly effective at stop. I think NATO's like, we kind of go back to the beginning of the video. Yeah, it's just a big money laundering, Ponzi racketeering scheme at this point in time.
And where information has the greatest effect to what to Mike's question, it's at it's at the lower level, it's at the community level, it's the interpersonal level. Like, you might not it might not be an immediate thing to where next year one of your friends gets to a point to where they're in a council, but in the end of the day, like what you have is you're having these discussions with people in your neighborhoods, in your towns, in the places that matter, right? Because those are the places where you do get the people that change things at a higher level, because people start to like them, and you have this free exchange of information. Like, there's so much that information can do. And it all starts with the discussions like we're having here in your own towns, in your neighborhoods, right? Like, that's where it all starts. And that, look at where that's brought us. I mean, look at how many people have changed the world, and they all started in a town talking with their neighbors. I mean, I not to trivialize it, but that's kind of like how we got our revolution. You had people who were disagreeable with the order of things, and they had meetings in a bar, like no bullshit. Like, it was meetings in a bar. And so information is vastly important, and it's more important than ever when you take that information, you have those meaningful conversations.
And so maybe that, I just thought of something though too, Redbeard, as we kind of start wrapping this up.
Yeah.
And that is so when we talk about information, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm thinking freedom of speech. And then you can't have the freedom of speech without the Second Amendment. So, and I'm not saying that, look, I mean, Jeremy and I will be the first people to say that if you're an American and you think you're free, I don't know what country you're living in. This is not what the Constitution reads. This is not what our founding fathers had. This has been perverted, and look, don't listen to us. We're just two knuckleheads who happen to have very nice beards. Jeremy's is looking pretty good, but we got nice beards. But go do your own research. I mean, I do like Chris Ann Hall. Jeremy turned me on to her a long time ago. But so again, and to AVV's point, why isn't this something that we're not having a national conversation over? Why are we in NATO? Why are the Dan Crenshaws, who see their position as elected officials, now that they're elected, they see their positions as just money laundering or money making ventures for themselves? Well, how else are we supposed to get ahead? You make $170 some $1,000 a year, you fucking piece of shit.
It's, and I know I've harped on this, but it's just because I feel like it's such an important point. And Mark, you've heard me harp on this so many times, probably ad nauseum. It probably makes you sick, to be honest. But I can't stress enough that a sovereign country, which recognizes its borders, which utilizes the will of its people, right? The people who make the decisions are the ones who are the ultimate determining factor of where the country goes. Not NATO, not the EU, not any other arbitrary organization that seeks to take or use or have this appeal of an alliance. But
that's how it should be.
Right. And that's my, maybe I am coming across as pleading, because this is a worldly struggle we're all in. Okay. This is not uniquely American. I want people to understand that this is not uniquely American. To my friends on here and to Mark's friends on here that are from different countries, which we have a couple tonight, I want you to have, free speech. I want you to be able to, if it's so your choice, to be able to have arms common amongst the people. I want you guys to have sovereignty of your people in your country, that you can make your decisions that best compel you in the direction that you feel is necessary. Not these decisions that are hung on this idea of what are other nations in this party or organization going to think if we decide to do things our way. There's so much more power in making your own decisions as your people, because in the end of the day, you guys know more what's best for your people than somebody in a different country. It's not for me to tell you how to live. I don't want other people to be a copy and paste American version. Okay. That's not what I want. You guys have a history and you have a culture and you have so many incredible things that you've brought into this world because you're uniquely you and you're not a copy and paste American. Much like we're unique because of certain things that we've codified in our Constitution and the principles that we have. That's what I want to see for the rest of the world. That's why NATO is a detriment to all of you. It's nothing more than just this vacuum of exploitation, and it takes the best out of all of you. You guys can do this on your own in many facets, and you can make proper diplomatic decisions together with other countries, but you don't need NATO to do it. You don't need NATO to have friends. You don't need NATO to be decent with people or parlay or anything like that. You guys don't give yourself enough credit. And I believe in the fact that we can all do this if we don't have NATO. We'll be more powerful and more emboldened to make proper decisions without NATO. And for the European people, that's something I would especially implore that you consider when it comes to EU, because the EU very much works in the same facet. And I just want to see the best for all of you the same way I want to see the best for us. That's all I'm saying.
And on that note, one of the things Redbeard just said there, and Mike kind of chimed in and saying, which his country did, the popular opinion in the country was to join NATO, and they threw away 200 years of neutrality.
Yes.
Okay. If that's the road you guys go down, I mean, then that's the road you guys go down. If
More
it really is,
yeah.
But then you should be going into it fully aware of all the, you know, the pros and the cons, and if you guys are like, hey, the pros are better, then, if the pros are so much better, then why are you guys talking about like, hey, we got to find more public land for potential, cemeteries. Now, again, that isn't a slight, because that's part of proper planning. Maybe you're identifying new locations, or this is something you're not used to. Mm-hmm. But I think the theme that Jeremy Redbeard and I are getting at is we see all these NATO officials, they're unelected officials, who seem to be acting like they seem to be acting like a pseudo nation state, making decisions for other NATO members, other NATO countries. You're going to do this or that, or you got to start thinking about this. Hey, Russia could start doing and if you want to talk fear mongering, just go look what NATO says every other day. Oh my God, Russia's going to, invade Brussels, or, there's going to be, there's going to be drones all over the place.
How many people have picked up a phone to even talk to anybody? Barely anybody. Talking is not even a thing anymore, because they're so driven on this idea that you have to hate somebody. And if you hate somebody, you can't talk to them. Well, that's how you get war. That's how you get death. That's how you get the annihilation of your people, because you're so arrogant that you think that you're that superior. And maybe you are. Maybe in the end of the day, you are that superior. But look, that's not something I want to risk my people over. The idea that you can't even have a discourse. How do you even know what these people think? It just, in my opinion, war should be the ultimate threat as to why you should make well-informed, good decisions that really have a benefit to your country. War should scare most people off, in my opinion, because it comes at the highest cost. So just to throw this out there, so as we're kind of wrapping up the NATO, then I'm going to bring it back over to Redbeard for his kind of closing comments. We'll keep this at 2 hours tonight, and very interesting. Look, Redbeard and I are going to talk on the phone once this is all done. I'm going to have a cigar, and we'll keep going for another hour. But I can't smoke right here, so and I definitely am getting ready. It's Friday night, having a cigar, just beginning 2025. But just on some of the theme that we're kind of getting at here, when people talk about war, and again, NATO's a war-fighting organization. It's what it's designed for, right? You could say it's supposed to be defensive in nature, but it's a war-fighting organization. And there's a lot of smart people, way smarter than I. So I'm just, repeating, things I've read or studied or whatever the case is. But you'll have a lot of, high-end, high intellect types talk about, well, if you're going to have a war, here's what it should be like. Never go alone, get in there quick, finish it, that kind of stuff. And, and don't do it by yourself. Now, this is going to sound a little interesting, but in scuba diving, which I used to do a lot of, you want to dive with a buddy. That's the general rule of thumb, right? You got a dive buddy. But I knew a lot of people who never wanted to dive with anyone else.
They were better off knowing their skills and, what they needed to do to self-recover if something went wrong. And they didn't have to rely, because like, I don't know what that guy's going to do in the middle of this crisis. And if that person does the wrong thing, we're both effing dead. Right. So I've got a better chance of saving myself. I mean, just think about it. If Redbeard and I have never trained with each other and we're going to clear a room or we're going to do whatever that task is, it's going to be a clusterfuck when we first try, right? Because we've never rehearsed it, right? Now, if we've gone to the same school for that task, we should be close to each other with maybe some
pick up nuances.
But that's what I'm just getting at. So like, maybe my last little thing, bringing it to Redbeard for why are we in NATO? Hey, maybe we're better off dealing with this one thing by ourselves and not involving anyone else, because that other person, back to our point, is it really interoperability? Are they really operating on the same set of tactics, techniques, and procedures, commo, gauges of the railroad? I know that sounds stupid. Go back to look at World War I, the gauge of the railroads. So all of these things start coming into play. So, and who's going to make the decision? Hey, you guys are driving Martyrs, and we're rolling with LAVs and Bradleys. But none of what if my guys don't know what the difference between a Martyr and a BRDM, or a BIM, BMP? I remember when I went through way back, and this is AVV, you might get this. This is like the 80s shit right here. And I'm going through anti-armor specialist course, and which was actually a really good course. But it was funny because whenever the French vehicles came up, like, again, you're trying to like look at these vehicles and, and differentiate. And at the very beginning, they're not making it tough on you. It's just a shoot, no shoot type of thing. As you get more, then they start asking you the nomenclature and how you knew it and all that kind of crap. But at first it's shoot, no shoot. And, pretty much every time a French vehicle came up, guys were like, shoot. And, then it kind of became a joke. And the instructor's like, yeah, well, maybe for that, you should. But then on that note, and I'm just making a joke. If you're from France, it's just a joke. I've actually done some stuff with French intel. And anyway, I got nothing but props, especially after going to Normandy for Normandy celebrations. Yeah. But anyway, that all the point I'm just trying to make is, so everything really needs to, because it's the fog of battle, right? That shit's going to happen. If you other 6 guys all have different color, this, that, or different shape of these things, how are we really going to work, as a unified organization? Unless I just put you way over on that flank and you don't ever come into my little zone or my area of operations. And that's really difficult to do in a combat zone. So NATO, if this is what it was supposed to have been, we didn't do any of that shit. We didn't streamline everybody. Like you said earlier, Redbeard, most countries still have their own defense industry and they're doing their own shit. So on that note, that's where I'm kind of going with that. So,
And I just want to make one point, because I definitely see where Mike in the Woods is coming from. I totally I get his point of view, and the only thing I'll reciprocate to one thing that he said, still don't see the logic of dismantling NATO and all countries standing alone. Well, that's the thing is you don't need NATO to stand together. Like, you can have a common cause without requiring NATO. And if people want to talk about standardization, I mean, we talked about that already when Patrick was here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he's like, it doesn't even exist, even though we say it does. So it's like, in the end of the day, like, I think that's where diplomacy opens up a lot of things, and you don't necessarily need an organization to do that. I mean, if that was the case, how did so many countries come together beforehand? Like, even pre-World War I, like, people figured it out. They really did. Like, it just, and they were able to streamline certain things, and they were able to make things work. I'm not saying maybe it is a little bit slower, but I'll guarantee you one thing. It was probably slower because they made actual informed decisions, and they were like, hey, like, does this actually benefit our people? Is this a fight worth being in? Like, if you get to a point to where people are like, I don't want part of this fight, well, they might have good cause to do that. Like, in what NATO has is, you can have people that say, this is not a fight that's going to benefit our people. This is going to destroy us as a country, literally destroy us as a country, where you bigger countries might survive. We won't. Okay. Like they don't have a choice.
And Redbeard real quickly, and that is on so many different levels. That could be economic, that could be generationally,
100%.
that could be culture. That could be, our country really
Look at
relies
Germany
on
right
the
now. They're a big
resources.
country, and they're devastated.
Yeah. Well, so if your country suffers the brunt of it, the Fulda Gap and nuclear weapons or whatever, and you needed the Ruhr Valley, for your steel production, whatever, and now that's uninhabitable for the next 200 years. Well, you're shit out of luck, so why? So to your point, and again, and I'm going to say this for everybody else watching, and again, we're not trying to be dickheads.
Mm-hmm. No,
but I also
just
see something, and I'm going to bring it to Redbeard to kind of wrap us up here. Take us out where you want, but we're Americans, and we're talking about this from an American perspective. Yes. And Redbeard and I individually are very constitutionally focused and freedom focused individuals. So I'm not picking on anyone else out there. Like, but if we're not joined together, we'll be weaker. I disagree.
Our whole country literally was designed with 50 sovereign states. Our states literally have the sovereignty of all of your countries. So we have the ability to do it. It's just we have too many stupid people at the helm right now to realize that that's the thing. So in the end of the day, like if there was a disagreement, our states have the ability to opt out and say no. When it comes down to other organizations, that's not necessarily the case. You get punished. That is one of the main premises of the American point of view, is the idea that sovereignty isn't given up regardless.
See, that's what I like right there. That's it. At the state level, the federal level, our founding fathers warned us about this stuff. No offense to our European brothers and sisters watching right now, having a drink. Gene already made a comment. Yeah, we had this little dispute over tea. It was actually, that was a good comment, but but that's just it. So this is hard pressed, indelibly, inked onto our foreheads. Like we don't trust. Well, we used to. Now we've got a new movement going in our country, and maybe that's why you're seeing. Well, maybe that's why we're sitting here talking about NATO, because the Jeremys and myself and as Americans, we're like, okay, dude, this is becoming, and that's the same thing with the World Health Organization. That's with any UN, like, no. Because the people from Wisconsin or Minnesota or Ohio or California have the right to say, yeah, we're not down with that. That's not really cool. And AVV might jump in on this. I see his comment about war horse. And that's what a lot of American politicians have become. And that's kind of been our argument. It's, you're there. I guess I'm summing up my side of the argument. That's what I see NATO has become, and the EU to some extent. It's individuals or groups or organizations that their actions are good for them, not necessarily good for the people or good for the organization, right? So I guess that's it for my side. Jeremy.
And I just want to kind of, add some flavor quick. I think the reason that perhaps Mark and I, as Americans, and I can't speak for every American, but why people like us that see and we come to these deductions and these conclusions, right, is because, yes, we are the United States, but each state has the same sovereignty as Germany or Britain or France or Serbia or whatever. Like, we are autonomous sovereign entities, right?
We're supposed to be.
That's how we're designed. Okay. And here's the thing. I think we recognize what's happening with NATO because it's happened over well over a century with the United States, where slowly but surely that sovereignty and that autonomy has been slowly eroded because of the balance of power. The balance of power in the United States was always meant to reside first within the people, secondly, the states, and then very, very limited, few and defined authorities and powers granted to the federal government. The government is the creation of the Constitution, which is the creation of the states, which is creation of the people. So when we're talking about this, I just want all of our European friends and our friends abroad, because I don't assume everybody's from Europe, but I want them to understand that, look, like, we're raising the alarm bells on here because we've seen what this type of structure can result in. And we are seeing this erosion of sovereignty that's happened with our states. And this is exactly, almost verbatim, what's happening with NATO right now. And it is leading us to a path of great trepidation. And I don't want anybody to experience that. Like, once it goes away, it is so difficult to try and get back. And there are states that are putting up a fight. But you have to understand, you have to rip that Band-Aid off, go through a 12-step program, and admit first that you have a problem. And so I say this, I say this with all the love and my brotherly compassion and empathy to all my European friends and those abroad. This is just my opinion from my experience in the 31 years that I've been here. Okay. And a lot has happened in just 31 years. Even more, Mark has seen a lot more than I have. My parents had, it's all I'm trying to say is there is a pattern here. And as I always tell Mark, I'm a big pattern guy. I don't want anybody falling into this trap. If you choose to be a part of this organization, that's fine. Like, I completely respect your decision. I just want you to understand that just because of that, you should be ever more vigilant at the potential consolidation of power and the ruination of your country.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
You join these organizations, these at your own peril. And yes, AVV just made a comment. Actually, I think, I'm not sure if I'm just reading it wrong but AVV, I think that's what exactly Redbeard was just getting at. Matter of fact, I know that's what Redbeard and my position is as well. We agree with that. And then, so just to throw that out there to echo Redbeard's comments for everybody else from wherever you are across the globe. No, we agree. That's what we're saying. Yes. We see this being eroded in our country. We're supposed to be the beacon on the hill. We're supposed to have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to all of those issues. And, to AVV's point, no, our states are giving that shit up. Fuck, we don't even have Congress declaring war anymore. So somewhere in the not too distant past, a bunch of dirty fucking politicians figure out how to game the system, just like on so many other levels. And then so to everybody else, as an American, that's what concerns me. Shitty politicians gaming the system. We're in alliances that might drag us into what we're going to go. Are we going to go to war with Turkey? Yeah. Our NATO ally is supporting an organization we deem a terrorist organization. Yeah, they overthrew Assad. Okay, was that really what we should have been hoping for to begin with? I mean, fuck, boys and girls, go back to Libya. I mean, just like, you think no one taught? See, here's how shit's all fucked up. Because if Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, if all that was hunky-dory, we'd be talking about it and singing the praises of, like, look how great of a job we did. It's crickets. We don't talk about any of that shit because our American leaders, for their ivory tower, I read this in a book once, bullshit, have led us and gotten us into this. So from Jeremy and our perspective, as the individual citizens who trumps all the rest, and I don't mean President Trump, I mean has priority. Like, no, you don't get to take away my individual rights or trample upon those rights or interject. AVV has said this, Jeremy, and my last comment, and I love it. Yeah, why are we not having referendums on this shit? Why are we not as people voting on this stuff? Yeah, absolutely, AVV. So, Jeremy, I don't know if they maybe set you up. That's where we need to start turning things around. It has to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And Gene's been killing it in the comments too. We the people says it all. Yeah. He mentioned who.
No, his best one is shitty politicians are lizard people.
Yeah, and it's and I just want to say, thank you for everybody who's commenting, because you're seriously, like, the fact that you're commenting shows me that you care. And so it's one of those things. Believe you me, Mike. I do too.
I didn't want to throw that up there. I didn't want to distract us, but I was like, both of us are like, I hope you're right, Mike.
Yeah, to be fair, like, I think it's still going to be rough going. We have a lot to work through here. And And I just want to tee off on something, that Mark was talking about, like when he brought up Libya and he brought up, Turkey and all of that. Like, look, like our government is not innocent. We have done some war crimes and atrocities in a very short amount of time. And
Barack Obama,
and
the big drone hellfire missile killer guy.
And we have funded some pretty interesting organizations of our own, Mark. And the thing is like, I also believe like that's why it's also beneficial to not be a part of an organization, because you can have a little bit more leeway in calling, other countries out, like saying, hey man, like your conduct is kind of unbecoming, and there's no insulation, and I think that insulation really, really, I think it's kind of a crutch, it's like being, it's kind of like being a part of the union. You can't ever question the union, like that's just not kosher. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much more we can go on, and I don't know where else to kind of go from here, but my big thing, man, is I really do want to see the best, not just for my country, but for the Europeans. You guys have, I don't, again, from an American perspective, whether it's Western Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, there's so much rich history there, and you guys are tough. Like, you're capable peoples and you're decision makers. And if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't even have the United States. You guys decided to bring boats over to this land that you didn't even know about. And then we got pissed off at you, kicked you out, and made our own country. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like we're all like, to some degree, like we all have our own grit. And I just don't see the necessity for an organization to affirm that. Like we know where we come from. And,
well, and just on that note right there, Redbeard, I want to have the ability, just like in every facet of my life, that like, so if Redbeard is calling me up saying, Mark, I need you to come over and help me with something. And he describes it and lays it out like, hey, somebody's trying to
help me move furniture.
No. Well, okay. That one's easy. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'll hold the doors open. That's about all I'm good for. But on that note, I mean, you're like, and then, like you start asking questions like, hang on a second, Jeremy, you want me to come over there and help defend your house from your neighbors who want to kick your ass because you've been going around and shitting in their garbage cans. Whatever. I don't want to be in some type of like, I'm obligated to do that. I mean, like, Jeremy, that's horrible behavior. If you got an ass whooping coming to you, just man up and take it and stop shitting in people's garbage cans, or whatever the thing is, I don't want to have to like, and more importantly, I mean, and maybe somebody is looking at me like, okay, are you going to get involved too, mother effer? I'm like, no, I mean, that's on him, don't kill him over it, but if you kind of, he's got to pay some penalties or do some shit.
Right. Yeah. It's, and I guess my closing thing is, we've had a serious talk about NATO, and thank you for everybody. I can't say it enough, for all of your perspectives and your points of view and stuff like that. I truly appreciate it, because I feel like there's not enough of it that occurs, especially on subjects like NATO, like conflict, and so many other things. And I just want to say that, to my detriment, it's great to have you, Mike. It's so good to see you. To my detriment, I haven't had the opportunity to travel abroad like I would have liked to, and I'm hoping to change that, and to go see different places and different people. And I think that's something that, more people definitely should aspire to do at least once, so you can meet people and you can put a face to somebody in a different country. And you can learn about, certain things about them. That's how you grow. That's how you become more diplomatic. That's how you start to understand why people see or do the things that they do in the ways that they do and the perspectives that they have. we've got to definitely be more human to each other, and we've got to be willing to pick up the phone. We've got to be willing to be diplomats. I said that before. We are each a diplomat from our own households. We're diplomats from our neighborhoods, and we're diplomats from our countries. And it really is upon us to extend that olive branch to the best of our ability. And look, if somebody doesn't want anything to do with you, then it is what it is, man. Like Mark always says, when you're ready to pick up the phone, we'll have a talk. Yeah. But we've got to be willing to pick up the phone. That's all I'm going to say. So,
well, or we at least have to be willing, again, just to have these open conversations. Yeah. I'm sure there was people who did not agree with us tonight, whether in the live or watching on demand. Yeah. Great. Well, then, present your case and explain why. I think we did a pretty good job of well, this is why we don't want to do it. Right. Yeah. This is why I don't agree with NATO. Right. That no one is sitting here saying oh, yeah, we're just giving the big, F you. But there is a part of that. I'm not an isolationist, but we've got a lot of our own shit to figure out. Yeah. I mean, we really do. And no offense to anybody else, but it ain't going to matter. If this or that is still going on, if we collapse. Yeah. And there's my little tinfoil hat. I'm going to have to make a tinfoil hat. I've got a bunch of extra hats.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to cover one up with tinfoil here pretty soon. But this is the design. This is the design. Get us into entangling, treaties, organizations, alliances, again, on global levels. And because, and boys and girls, you don't have to agree with it. This is my opinion, but it's all about eroding those individual liberties that we as Americans uniquely have, or we view that we're unique. However you guys want to say it. I don't care. You guys, you arrogant Americans.
Human beings.
Yeah. But you see, that's what I was just going to go with, Redbeard. Yeah. There. That was going to be my point. This isn't just us, boys and girls. Redbeard, take it. This is all of us have these rights. Yeah. This isn't something that a government gives you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like I said earlier, this is a human and a worldly issue. It's not specific to the United States. And, especially when you look at, and I know it's been kind of a theme tonight, but when you look at war, it's no, I want to have an opportunity to have a decision in that. It's not okay for me to be able to be no, I don't get a decision in war. And if our government functioned the way that it was intended to, I'd have more of a voice to say that. But I don't. And I'm hoping that in the next several years, with the trend that things are going, despite Trump, I mean, you're having people that are becoming more awake and more aware of these things. And I hope for our future posterity and our children that people realize the liberty and the right that they have. And whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in Sweden, wherever you are, all of these things exist within you, and it's up to you whether or not you're going to retain them. So, it's not a uniquely American thing. It's a worldly thing, and we all have to be better custodians and diplomats of these things. So.
And then right there, let's end it on that, because the last two comments that just came in, AVV and Gene, and I just popped both of them up. But at the end of the day, it's sitting down, like what we're talking about, sitting down, working things out, man to man, having that adult conversation. It's a lost art. Yeah. And that's so again, if that's your takeaway, I hope that is part of the takeaway. Yeah. Jeremy and I are talking about NATO, but what we're really getting at is that right there. Why do I need to be in some organization alliance with a whole bunch of people who maybe don't have my interests at heart or are taking my money? Again, all the, not to visit the whole thing. Why can't we just all do what AVV just said? Why can't I'm okay, if you need my help, sit down and talk to me. And if it's in my interest, or I don't think, if I think you were an innocent party and you didn't start the fight, I'm willing to help out. America has done that time and time again. So don't anyone say, you guys are, motherfucker, America has bailed the world out, financially and with our blood and treasure way more time. So
before NATO was ever a thing.
Yeah. So that's not who we are. That's not what we're saying. We're all about helping people out, but I think our point is to what AVV and Gene just said. No, but that doesn't mean we just have to roll over and take it. And why are we in NATO? I don't want to see any American or European, any NATO member, any individual, boy or girl from a NATO country, go to some war because Turkey is hanging out with terrorists and somehow that spills into some conflict with Greece or who fucking knows, or this thing in Ukraine and Russia. You notice we didn't even talk about Nord Stream. See, again, we've already forgotten half of that shit. Who did Nord Stream? That wasn't Russia. Come on, man. Come on, man.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, there's so many subjects that stem from it. And, we lightly touched on the EU, and so did some of our comments, some in the comments section. There's such a vast litany of conversations that can be spurned off of this, and maybe we'll come back to them, down the road, which I actually kind of hope we do, because, and especially with, some of our friends here from Europe and around the world, because your guys' perspectives are so important in this conversation. Like if I'll put it this way, if one of our big achievements is giving you guys a voice and giving you a place to where you can talk about these things and you can put out your perspectives and do whatever. I'm not saying it in a selfish way. I'm saying it like for you guys to tell your side of the story. If this allows you to do that, then we've done our job.
Yep.
And not just the American perspective, because when we talk about conflict and we talk about the world and we talk about NATO and the EU and all of this, like this involves everybody. So, and your voices, especially when it comes to NATO and the EU, are super important because that directly affects you a lot more in some ways than it affects us. So it's important that you guys step up and you make your voices heard, especially with some of the absolute authoritarian shit that you guys have to deal with over there that we've somehow avoided just narrowly, as Mark has said, like on some of these
creeping in. It's creeping in. It's creeping in.
So I appreciate all you guys. I really do. And
well, no, you're not done yet. You're going to do our little outro. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. Not bad. We didn't Joe Rogan it, but we kind of still kind of Minnesota goodbye a little bit.
Yeah.
But to Jeremy's point, great comments. This is what the live streams are supposed to be about. It ain't just for us because we do this shit all the time on the phone anyway. I mean, so but I like how we did get, and I don't know, maybe you guys let me know, in an email or in the comments afterwards or however you want, or if you watch this on demand. I think, I liked actually doing a lot more of the chat here on the Cialis side tonight. We normally don't do that, but I think that kind of as the conversation got going. I mean, that could sidebar us, but I think it actually worked out really good, especially because we were talking about a subject where there was people in the chat, again, from different countries, different angles, different perspectives. So I really did like that. And that is my kind of comment before I bring it over to Jeremy. That is why we need to have conversations. Back to that thing about 10, 20 minutes ago. That's why we need to have information.
Yeah.
That's why we need to have this ability, because otherwise that shit just never gets brought to the surface. It never makes the light, or it doesn't, come across the surface of the water. And then it's just forgotten and never talked about. And it doesn't instigate or compel somebody to like ask a question like, hey, hang on a second. Why are we spending another $6 billion in Ukraine right now? Like, shouldn't that be the new administration doing that? Because it's, so even if it still doesn't make any fucking sense. It gives the appearance of, people are robbing the bank on the way out, or they're stealing from the, all the candy store, on the way out. So, and then final comment, and then bring it back over to you, Redbeard, for our closing comments. But Gene, Redbeard, I thought he was going to say you have a head on your shoulders older than your youthful beard. Yeah, he's giving you some nice props there.
I appreciate it, Gene. Thank you very much.
Good points. Can't wait to see you on here again. Gene, that was very kind. That was very kind.
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, Redbeard, let's do a little mission critical. Take us on out here, my good man.
So Mark doesn't know I'm going to say this because it was something that I had just kind of put together on my own.
All right, last little bit. Okay, so Monday next week, Millstone, myself and Blake, that'll be 1800 Central. And I'll do a video tomorrow talking about the 2024 Bundaroo for all of our leftover next business day products that we still have on stock right now. All right.
Nice.
All right. I had a
Hey,
I mean, after all, I mean, come
what
on.
is the world without a shameless self-promotion? Am I right?
All right, hey.
Um,
I don't have these lights dim because for the effect. It's because, like, dude, I have to pay for this shit. Like,
yeah, trying to manage the power situation. We're almost to Europe. No, just kidding. That was a low blow. Sorry, guys. But Mark doesn't know I was going to posit this, but I wanted to put this out to you guys to see before I make my final statement. Given the discourse and the conversations that exist, there's a couple different platforms that exist out there, whether it's like Telegram or Discord or whatever the case is. And if it's something that Mark is interested in, and I could certainly help him foster this for the sake of conversation, and it's something that you guys are interested in, we could have it set up to where we could do, we could bring everybody together, we could post a time, and we could just have a worldly chat and have people from different parts of the world. These are applications that cost you nothing. They don't cost you anything out of pocket. You can do a free voice call or a meeting call, and we can get to know each other and be able to actually hear from your guys' mouths, your points of view, things that are happening in your country, concerns and stuff like that, to broaden that perspective outside of just a one-way conversation from us in the video, just talking to you and you guys having to write back. So if it's something you guys might be interested in and Mark might be interested in, I know I kind of put him on the spot, but it's something that I've done a couple times with people. And I tell you what, when you get people from different countries on a voice call or something similar like that, it's amazing how people can have different opinions and you can respect each other. And you're
also
able
amazing
to,
how you can't understand what the other person's fucking saying.
Oh, dude, there's so much broken English. It's not even funny.
Hey, just to address that. So, we have the CLS gear chat, and a lot of the guys who were in the chat tonight, I think Mike is, I don't know if I've seen him, but we've got a bunch of people from Europe in there. I'd like to see a lot more people.
Definitely.
I don't want you committing me to doing more time, because I'm like, my thing for 2025 is I've got to really manage my time a lot better going forward. So, but I think we're already kind of doing some of that with the CLS After Dark and with the CLS Gear Chat. So you and I can just maybe sit and talk about it, because I'm not opposed to the idea. I just,
it would take a while to flesh out if it was something that was done. So we definitely have to talk about it. And like I said, I could help Mark with that. But I think it would be
part of that is, like, I should just probably advertise the fact that half of the guys who, in these chats or in these videos are, like, maybe I should I've got to do way better social media this year. And it's like, hey, Australia, Europe, whatever, like, hey, there's a lot of your, countrymen, over here talking. Why don't you join in the fun? So, like, right now, I mean, just off the top of my head, so it's 8:30 now, 20:30 our time. So that's not quite noon in Australia on a Saturday. Come on, Australia. How come one of you isn't having a beer watching this live stream, for your breakfast? It's Saturday, dude. Come on. I do a pretty good amount of business with Australia. I should probably do some videos like that and kind of, because that is, my comment, and then you take us out. But so again, we can figure that out. But I do like the commentary, and I do like the fact that, for me as a business, and more importantly, me as a human, a lot of my customers, I don't have just American customers. I have a lot of customers from Europe and from Australia, and quite a few from Japan as well, honestly. So it's just nice to be able to communicate and talk to those people, and again, just, you get a chance to talk, like we're just saying the whole time, it's diplomacy, Gene is saying it's 2:30 in the morning right now in the UK.
What Gene, a warrior, dude.
You are, so, and I don't know, like, so these 1800 start times, which everybody wanted. Oh, gosh almighty, it gets pretty late.
See what happens? Like,
if you guys don't shut up, it will be breakfast time before, we're done here. So,
right.
Gene is seriously a trooper, big time.
You're awesome, Gene.
Redbeard, bring us on up, man. Take us out. Hey, before he does it, final comments. Thank you guys. so very much. Thanks for everybody leaving comments, the engagement, the opinions, the questions.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. That was the whole point of these. This has been a million times more fun. Not quite the 6 billion we just gave to Ukraine, but it's been a million times more fun than going to a bar on a Friday night. So I personally love it. This is what I hoped these things would be like. And, except I'm way too, I don't know, Gene. I don't know how you can do it. 2:30 in the morning. I don't even know what that'd be like right now. I think I'd probably break inside if it was 2:30 in the morning. I was doing something.
Yeah, no, that's well, I mean, between him and Mike in Sweden, I mean, I'm sorry for waking you up or keeping you up. We're not responsible. You consented to this. So,
hey, all right. I'm prettying up my beard one last time. Everybody knows that's a drink. Redbeard.
Yeah.
Take us out, my good man.
All right. So I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to come back and do the NATO conversation. And I think that there's a number of different topics that I would love to come back for surrounding, maybe not particularly NATO, but are very close knit to that. And I know that there's a lot that could have been said that hasn't been said yet. And so I'd love the opportunity to come back and do that. That being said, I can't stress enough, that idea of being a good custodian and being a good diplomat, firstly from your household. That's big. You represent your household, you represent who you are as a person, and it's important to do that in the best way you can. And then secondly, from your community, you should, when you go from your community and you meet people, you're kind of an emissary. Even as an individual, you're an emissary from where you are, and you have an opportunity to give where you're from a good name. Even if it's not the best place to live, you can still put a positive face on a bad blotch. And that also goes forward with, where you're from country-wise. I've had the pleasure of meeting people from Russia, from Ukraine, from Poland, from places down in South America, Central America, and over in the UK and several other places. And I'm here to tell you that people are amazing, dude. And when you provide an opportunity for yourself and you get the opportunity to meet other people and you hear their stories and you realize, that you also are responsible for putting on a good face, it puts a lot of things in perspective. So be a good diplomat, be a good emissary, carry forth a positive disposition, and take the opportunity to get to know people. That's my big message, because if you can do that, dude, there's so many positive outcomes and so that you can get from it, and there's so many negative ones that you can rectify and stop before they get out of hand. So I spread, I guess, a final note of hope and just goodwill, being a human being, show some empathy, and maybe we can all get along on this this marble that Mark likes to call us. So this big blue marble.
It is a big blue marble, and it's our home, and we have to take care of it. But to that point, you have to take care of your home, and I don't want it to sound like, hey, but if somebody comes and starts fucking with yours, or breaking your shit, you've got to come. Again, we kind of talked about that war fighting thing. You go in there and you end it quickly, right? And you do it. Mm-hmm. So this isn't some peacenik. I spent 30 plus years of my life doing this shit. So hey, I don't want to do it. I'm proud of the service, and I'm sure everybody else who's ever been in uniform is proud of the service and the contribution they made. I saw AVV. I don't want to experience any of that again, and I don't want anyone else to have to experience it again. However, that is the reality of the world, and but to what we're just kind of getting at, just kind of ending it right there. Jeremy, like if you think Jeremy's like, oh, what a pacifist thing to say, Jeremy will be the first person who will smash your face in if you're fucking with his family or, trying to steal and break his shit, man. So don't take that the wrong way, boys and girls. That's all I just want to end it on right there.
I prefer methods and ways of doing things before you have to get to the worst outcome.
Amen. That's right.
And people tend to like you a little bit more.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Save that shit for, okay, we've exhausted every opportunity, and this is what we're left with. It really is going to come to this. And then you just take that breath and say, okay, I'm going in with both feet and I'm going to end this quickly, because that's what's going to be the most humane thing to do.
Maybe we can grab drinks after we're both bleeding and beaten down and stuff like that.
Maybe it won't be the only time in the history of humanity where two guys beat the shit out of each other and went and got drunk afterwards.
I'm just saying.
Remember those days? They were kind of like that, like used to happen like that all the fucking time.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us tonight. Big, huge shout out to Redbeard. P. Rick, he's not here anymore.
So
awesome. Got a family and a social life and something he had to do tonight, whatever. But hey, but no, big hat, thank you and hats off to P. Rick. And but more importantly, because we're losers and we would have done this anyway, huge shout out, hats off, and thank you and God bless to all of you great men and women who stayed up with us, watched this video, had fun, made comments, or if you're watching this on demand, God bless you. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Monday, the 6th of January, Millstone. Myself and Blake will be talking about our Millstone Self-Reliance Group. We'll do that on a special first Monday of the month. And then next week, I guess I should just do that last fluff. Thursday is an everyday organizer loadout. And then Friday, the Cialis After Dark next week. And we might get P. Rick. You heard us talk about a little bit tonight, but it'll be DB, another guest, and then maybe Patrick coming on, and we're going to wrap up our Coast and Benghazi story, talking about those issues from a bunch of former CIA guys. So that'll be next Thursday and Friday. Thursday will be the Edo Everyday Organizer loadout, and then Friday will be wrapping up the Coast and Benghazi conversation. All right, I guess now that I rambled a little bit, Redbeard, last comment.
Yeah, no, just be good to people. Be good to each other. Don't hate each other because somebody else tells you to. That's all I'm going to say.
Boom. There it is. All right, everybody. Reach out if you got questions, comments. I'll do the best I can to help you out. Still might be like, well, there's nothing I can do about that, but I will do my best to help you out. Until then, keep thinking, keep moving. I can't do that. That's my normal outro. I got to come up with an outro over here on Cialis After Dark. I guess we'll just see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Woo!
Toodles.